We're going to get started. I'm so excited. Thank you guys again so much for being here for our first book club, our October book club, featuring the amazing Nathan Reynolds and his book, Snatched from the Flames, which I know if you guys read it, whether it was the physical book or if you were like me and the second time that I just read it this month, I listened to the audio on his YouTube page and I was a mess. It hit me so much differently than when I read it the first time, like hearing him narrate it. So I hope that you guys, if you guys read the physical book, go back sometime and watch his YouTube version. He has a whole playlist where he reads his book, sort of like how Lisa does. Lisa Meister's on the call too. Lisa reads her book for us on her podcast, Only God Rescued Me, My Journey from Satanic Ritual Abuse, in her Spotify membership portion called Lisa's World. So it's really cool when authors do that. They give us sort of a glimpse of being in their head, and we get to go through the journey with them and hear their actual voice tonation, inflections, their emotions as they're actually reading it to us. So you guys go watch that too whenever you get a chance and listen to it. You'll get to take in the information a totally different way. So I know Nathan doesn't need introduced, but welcome, Nathan. Thank you so much for being here. It's an honor. And then above, you guys might see some new faces or some faces that you guys haven't seen in a while. Becky and Bridget, who run the Save Our Children podcast. So they were a sister podcast to my podcast, and their focus was the parenting aspect of everything that I talk about. So they had some R-rated stuff, but a lot of times it was stuff that you could listen to as a family, stuff that you could implement with your family. They featured their kids on that podcast sometimes and got some insider perspective on a child's eye view of events that go on in the world, trafficking, and it was just really cool, all the things that they've done. So I encourage you guys to go subscribe to them on YouTube, connect with them on social media. But they are my business partners for my business that I don't talk about often, but it's what started this podcast to begin with and what this stands for, which is Stand By Survivors. So I met Becky and Bridget many years ago. How many years? 4 years ago or something? 5 years ago?
3.5, 4 years, yeah.
It's crazy how fast time goes on. And they were sort of the first people that I found in my journey of awakening to all of this. They were the two that I met on my journey that cared about this movement for our children as much as I did. And I was in the process of like losing all my friends, having my family think I was a conspiracy theorist. And I felt so alone. And these girls came along and were like, I understand you. Let's all learn together. We're your new family. So we started a business together, and it's essentially a resource center for survivors. The podcast is an entity of that, so is theirs. So our goal together is to help change the world and make it a better place for the kids. And, it's been a really awesome journey having all you guys on our side during this. So I'm going to let Bridget actually open up this with a prayer, sort of like how I do on the podcast, and then we're going to get to it. And Becky, we're going to let Becky say the prayer.
Bridget's like, no.
And then we're going to turn it over to Nathan and get to your questions, you guys. So let's go ahead and start with a prayer.
Great. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for making all things new. Thank you for all you've allowed into our lives this past year, the good, the hard things that have reminded us how much we need you and to continually rely on your presence each day. We pray for your spirit to lead our steps. We ask that you guide our decisions and turn our hearts to deeply desire you above all else. We ask that you will open doors needing to be opened and close the ones needing to be shut tight. We ask that you would help us release our grip on the things to which you've said no, not yet, or wait. We ask for your help to pursue you first above every dream and desire you've put within our hearts. We ask for your wisdom, strength, and power to be constantly present within us. We pray you would make us strong and courageous for the road ahead. Give us the ability beyond what we feel able. Let your gifts flow freely through us so that you would be honored by our lives and others would be drawn to you. We pray that you'd keep us far from the snares and traps of temptations, that you would whisper in our ear when we need to run and whisper in our heart when we need to stand our ground. We pray for your protection over our families, friends, and anyone who listens to this book club. We ask for your hand to cover us and to keep us distance from the enemy's evil intent, that you would be a barrier to surround us, that we'd be safe in your hands. We pray that you would give us discernment and insight beyond our years to understand your will, hear your voice, and know your ways. In Jesus' name, Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Becky. That was beautiful. And again, thank all of you for joining. There was a couple of people that just joined. So if you're new and you just popped in, at the bottom of your screen, there's a little chat icon. Bring that up on your screen. And if you have any troubles, raise your hand. There's a little hand icon too. We can help you. But find the little chat icon. It'll come up on the side of your screen and you guys can start asking your questions there. So again, thank you all for being here. And I'm going to actually turn it over to our guest of honor, Nathan Reynolds. Nathan, thank you so much for being here today.
I'm so humbled to be here, y'all, and actually get to see people's faces. This is a totally different experience altogether. I'll be honest. You can sit there and do shows and recordings and all the rest, but you normally just never get to see people. So thank you guys for joining in and gals for joining in. This is incredible. And it's beautiful to see actual people over here. You know, there's faces behind these identities out there, these character meme things out there. So I'm glad you're real humans. It's beautiful to see.
Yes, it is really cool. This is a totally different experience. I'm like, we need to do this more.
Yeah.
So Nathan, I'd love to start, this book that you created for us, for the world, for future generations, for your kids. It is such an impactful book. It's brilliantly written. There's so much intimacy with what you went through. And I would love if you talked about maybe that moment that you knew this was something that I had to do, and your process creating it, and really what you wanted people to get out of it at the end of the day.
Man, this is I've been waiting my whole life to tell my story. At the end of it, I wanted to be able to document what had taken place for me. On one side of it, it's my own healing journey. Just writing is an incredibly intimate part of my healing that helps me give language and understanding to something that I don't think I can really talk about otherwise. It's just like a part of my life has always been sealed behind a wall of inability to communicate. And when I sit down and I write, it's those vanguards of fear slip away. I don't have to look at people's faces when I'm writing. Just to be honest with y'all, it's a lot harder to sit here and stare people in the face and talk about some of these things that are genuinely some of the most painful and embarrassing and shameful and abominable experiences of my entire life. But to sit there and write it out has been incredibly freeing to me. And it's something that I've been doing since I was very, very little. And writing was a passionate outlet for me, always has been. And it was a way that I could sneak my memories into the pages of somewhere that they maybe couldn't get blotted out from. And so I documented so much of my life, but I couldn't write down a lot of these things that happened to me. And so when I finally was freed up to have that voice and to be authentic to the world in a different way, it was so empowering to me. And I always knew this is something that I was made to do. At the end of the day, I really believe this is something that I was born for, was to share this out. And as much as you guys that have read the book know, it's not entirely just my testimony about, SRA, ritual abuse and generational incest families and all this stuff. There's a huge other component of there that I am trying to set people free from the doctrines of deceit wherever they are. And that's a lot of different areas of our lives. And so that's a huge critical component to me that I always want to try to advance the kingdom of truth, no matter the cost. And so when I find those areas of deception, I always want to try to bring those to the light so that there can be healing and deliverance from the doubt and the despair and the hopelessness, because I never wanted anybody to be stuck with all of these horrible. You can't give people all these horrible problems and not give them a solution. If you leave them there, it's torture. It is the same torture and trauma. It's a vicarious trauma, and I don't ever want to leave anybody in that position. So even how I structured the book was also with survivors in mind, that it doesn't leave anybody in that dark place forever too long. I try to bring people out of that as much as I can, as long as I can, and leave them with a message of hope at the end of it.
I think you do a fantastic job of that. And like we were talking a little bit earlier, for us, the elites and some of the stuff that you write about, we are aware of it. Now, we're not aware, obviously, to the depth of many other survivors, but we are aware. And so that part of the story, it was just validation to stuff we knew. And so that was really, it was so well written, because it's not distasteful like other things you've read, and it's easy on the palate, especially I'm sure for some survivors, where it's not really too heavy. Where I really struggled with the book as a non-survivor is when it hit my heart, where all of a sudden it's the stuff that we do daily is not real, or it starts to unweave kind of all of the web that's been there. And specifically when we talk about holidays and doctrines of the church, like Bridget and I, we go to the same church. It's a Christian church. It's a Bible church. And really for us, luckily, our pastor calls it throat punchy. He's pretty throat punchy and kind of really is, this is what the Bible says and this is what it means. But we're also the same church that is out there celebrating Halloween right now, and the church that is going to celebrate Christmas and going to celebrate Easter. And so reading those parts of your book were real, like I already knew this isn't right, this isn't true, but reading those parts, it was like, but how do we fix it? So many people are unaware of the history, the why, like even the celebrating Easter. If someone dies on a certain date, why do we change the date? And we celebrate it on a different day every year. And so just that was probably the hardest thing for me to read, was this now impacts me. So how, not that it doesn't all, but how do I help others learn who think they're doing the right thing? And so that, I guess that'd be my question, is what, I know others are probably out there, how do we talk to other people about, like, Christmas isn't Christmas, guys? And at a big level too, like everyone we have Christmas pageants and we talk about all these things and we reference the Bible when Jesus wasn't even born on December 25th.
It's a great question. I think one of the best ways to do that is to first always start out by asking a sincere and authentic question about whether somebody is willing to have a hunger for the truth. At the end of the day, if people aren't really interested in finding out the truth about their life, you're going to be fighting a really unnecessary uphill battle. And it's generally the cost of it is a lot of people's relationships. It's good to do some probing. It's just how I would say it super transparently. You got to find out whether people are ready to even hear the information, like about whether the origins of things, because that should matter to some, but not to everyone. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you've got to find out whether people are ready to receive that information. You can bring them all to it as much as you want. At the end of the day, same thing that survivors struggle with is trying to get their stories to be understood by others. And there's a lot of people that genuinely, sincerely, at the heart of it, don't want to know the truth. And they want to live in ignorance. They are much more comfortable in the sands of ignorance, which literally means they want to ignore things. So finding out whether or not they're willing to investigate something with you or come alongside you on a journey of finding out the origins of these practices, of these traditions, that's always a really good one, is just trying to find out whether somebody's willing to go down that road with you before you invest your time, which is precious, because you got to be careful about casting your pearls to everyone. Not everyone's interested, and sometimes they're going to turn and devour you. So it's good to be able to do a little terrain mapping before you get into it with everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great.
Going off of that too, I want to touch on, for everyone listening, whether you've listened to Save Our Children podcast or The Imagination with Emma, satanic ritual abuse is one thing we always talk about. So those who hear us when we say SRA, for those who are just hearing the new terms or not finished with the book, SRA is satanic ritual abuse. Going off of that, from a survivor standpoint, and especially with the holidays, including, for example, Halloween, and how many people still celebrate that and don't realize not only the programming, but passing that off even to the children. And I'm not going to say me, because I don't celebrate it, especially once I learned about SRA and the depths of what was happening to the children in SRA. Once you have to do better, and it changes your whole perspective. So going off of that, with especially, for example, Halloween, from a survivor standpoint, can you share even just how that affects you, as many people forget that survivors, no matter what the healing that you've done, healing doesn't go away. It's an ongoing process. So even with healing, and there's still triggers, how do you deal with that, especially during rituals, especially leading up to major holidays and rituals where the bigger rituals take place?
What a great question. There's definitely an increasing of vigilance, just to put it super transparently. You know, there's and now it's different because my children are getting old enough to really understand what is going on. Like my daughter's asking me today about this woman's outfit at the store that was just utterly grotesque, blood dripping out, like horrible, like disgusting. I mean, just utterly disgusting, dressed like a necromancer. And she's going into vivid detail because she's old enough to really see these things and understand it and communicate it with me. And on one side of it, I'm angry, you know, perpetually. Just to put it super transparently, I'm basically always angry during this season because I see a worship factory for death, like a fear factory on one side of it. And you know that they are replenishing their batteries. Like I look at all of this as I see this pagan idolatry, y'all, is just a recharge of the batteries. They have to recharge every so often because their iniquity force, this blood fest, this fear and hatred and death and despair and loneliness and anguish of soul and rage and murder and all these negative, dark, occult energies that get supercharged during this time are just to top off their batteries. And I know ultimately the conduits for that and the appetites for that are always targeted towards systemic sorcery. There's no way around it. Like these people are master priests and priestesses of a priest class that rules over our society. And it sucks because you sit there and you know that they're gaining power. You know that they are going to use this and weaponize these very actions against people, including those who know better and do it anyways. This is the greatest transgressions, you know, and there's no way around it. Like you're going to reap a way worse reward on this. And especially when you try to go and engage in any kind of frontline ministry of any capacity, when you start trying to contend against the kingdom of darkness and you've got this junk drawer of worship of death in your playhouse, it's going to come kicking your teeth in, you know? And so it's definitely aggravating. It's definitely a triggering time for me. But I think if anything, it just creates another hypervigilance. Every one of these holidays is like that because for me, it was always a very different, this week leading up to this was always a seek and destroy time frame. It was always trying not to get kidnapped. You know, it was trying not to get sodomized. It was a very different fear and loathing that was taking over me all the time. And so I still had echoes of that throughout my life, but it's just changed, I think, now because I do have my own family and my own children, and there's a different kind of desire to abstain and get away from it all. But the truth is you inherently can't to some levels of it because they start this process back months beforehand. So I appreciate you asking that question, though.
You're welcome. And for those of you who are tuned in, do know, especially survivors, we did not do a trigger warning. So do know from this point, even just going off of, as we're talking about SRA and those who are tuned in, that will be your trigger warning. But as you've listened to all of us talk, we don't sugarcoat the conversation. And so if you do feel triggered, feel free to step away from the conversation and then tune back in, because again, we have to have the uncomfortable conversations, not only for the victims, the survivors, but mostly, especially the children. And that's one conversation we don't sugarcoat. So that's our sorry, not sorry. But honestly, too, just going off of that is just those of you who are just now waking up to this and learning about the holidays and the deeper meanings of it. And as you read not only Nathan's book, but even Lisa's book and going forward with the book club, SRA is one heavy topic and it will trigger childhood trauma as we talk about trauma and getting to the root of trauma and healing. So like Nathan said, we like to shine the light on the darkness, but also leave it with hope. And so with that too is with Halloween and going into the holidays is learning the deeper meanings of the rituals that if you do celebrate this holiday, we're not here to shame you. We've all been there before. And so many people are just waking up to this. So I don't want anyone to look at this conversation like we're shaming you, especially if you're parents, but look at the rituals even of grooming and what that means when you're taking your kids trick-or-treating and getting candy from strangers. And so just look at the deeper meanings of all of it and just look at this conversation with an open mind. But even Nathan, going back to programming, one thing I want to talk to you about is the military and SRA and how much you've overcome in healing, but also trauma. And so how did you, and I know this is going to be a loaded answer and question because there's so much to unpack with trauma, but even just your journey, you've overcome so much in the military, especially. And for those who are listening and are veterans, how do you even begin that process? Because so many get stuck in the mindset of they stay in the victim mindset as well as stuck in survival. And when you're dealing with PTSD and CPTSD, so many don't even know where to start or how to unpack that, because not only MK Ultra, but then they don't realize that they're even SRA survivors because the amount of trauma. So how do you, for anyone listening who is even trying to find their purpose and struggling with identity and how to even address that, or the first steps, what would be some advice or something that helped you when as you had to face your shadow?
How to face your shadow. That's the right question. At the end of the day, that dark passenger was the one I had to deal with. And especially coming out of the military, every single person who goes through the United States military is going to go through trauma-based mind control. It is by definition trauma-based mind control without any question, or there's no veneer that's hiding that fact and that reality. And so every person that goes through it has their own process of programming that's necessitated out. You purely have to come out of that and find. They didn't give me a switch to turn back into a civilian, if that makes sense. And that's the worst part of the entire thing. There's not a deprogramming center that you go to when you're finishing out your time in the United States military, and you go from literally having power. Let's just put it super transparently. They break you down and rape. They take your identity to such an extreme, horrible level out of you, and then they give you a completely different version of it. And for so long, you're definitely lost in that. Like the Army and every branch of the military does it different. The United States Army breaks you down and turns you into a maggot. Like they turn you into a total worm, an infantile, debased, ruined thing, like a dying dog. And then they never really rebuild you. The Marines are different because they have this way of releasing you from that and then making you believe that you are the honor class warrior, like a true warrior in a powerful and united fighting force. Whereas the Army had a different way of just leaving you as a debased grunt. That was the word that they have for it. Like you're just basically trash. And so you're pissed off, you're angry, you're tired, and you're crabby all the time, and you're just waiting for somebody to let you go kill something, And so when you go from that world into the civilian world where you're not respected the same way because you're not sleeping with a rifle, like you literally are sleeping with a rifle 24/7. You're sleeping with grenade launchers and machine guns, like as your partner. And so to go from that to sleeping in a dorm room or sleeping next to a spouse who you haven't seen for months or years, it's an incredibly difficult process. And this is why 80% to 90% of veterans lose their wives, lose their relationships, their marriages when they come back, because their loss of identity is so distinct. They're trapped in a time zone that doesn't exist to the rest of the waking world. And in order to come out of that, you've got to go across a bridge of facing down an unutterable chasm of hopeless despair and depravity. And you became something so not unhuman, so unperson-like. You became a monster. And you got to decide whether or not you want to become a man again, become a woman again. Do you even want to? Do you want to go back to the civilian world? Or I spent a lot of that time just trying to grope my way back into that world. I wanted to go back because I was respected, because I had the power to kill on command. And I missed it. I missed the ability to have a brotherhood that would back me up and support in that way. And I was so stranded and isolated. I didn't know if I could come across that bridge without destroying myself, without dying along the way. But I also saw how strategically they began to kill off the veterans. I began to see how much they were suiciding them and how many drugs were being pumped into them. And then they were taken off of them until they killed themselves time and again. And I recognized the real war with the United States military is not the one you wage when you're serving them. It's the one you have to wage in order to survive them when you get out. And that's ultimately why you have to face down those things. And radical vulnerability is the cure towards trauma. I'm absolutely certainly convinced that is what is necessitated for every person who's been through trauma, is to be willing to become completely undone. Completely. You were disintegrated at a time for a season, if that was intentional and strategic by those who did it, or whether that was unintentional because of the circumstances of your life. You still have to be willing to go back to that place of disintegration and face it and allow the trauma to be there, and to not shame it, to not be ashamed of it, and to find courage to know that you can have cleansing and restoration from that, no matter what it was.
I love that. Great questions, Bridget and Becky. I'm gonna for the second, I'm not gonna go in order, just because I had and somebody wanted you to elaborate on what you just said, Nathan. So I'm gonna read this message to you. It sounds like it's from a spouse who is dating somebody or married to somebody that is a survivor, and she's wondering how she can be there for him. So I'm going to read this for you, because I think that's important to you, for people who knows, if you know a survivor, or if you're dating one, if you're married to one, it's really good insight to be on the other end to learn. So what she wrote was, he's constantly ready to fight. He always has a weapon on him. He has intense audio awareness. He can't turn his hearing off. He refers to cage fights and will minimize it and say it was just schoolyard fights, but I know it wasn't. He thinks spatially and can assess his surroundings and get oriented in a second. He has major injuries and his body is constantly breaking down. I had no idea how hurt he was until we reunited a year later, and it was really hard for me to accept how broken he feels. He doesn't feel like he can be a provider or a father. He has super intelligence in a lot of ways, but in other ways, his brain is so scarred, it's hard for him to hold down a job. He's obsessed with the event and trying to prep for it. He desperately wants a family, and I just don't know how to be there for him and how to be realistic about what's possible. So maybe, Nathan, like, if you could talk on your behalf of being a survivor and some things maybe Chelsea did that were really, really helpful for you.
He sounds wonderful. First of all, I just got to say that. He sounds wonderful. All too familiar, all too familiar. That's kind of hilarious. Sometimes I think I hear people's stories and I'm like, oh man, this sounds like someone's reading my bio. That is literally what it's like. What do you want from people like us? At the end of the day, we are going to be hyper vigilant people. We're probably not going to let our guard down too often. And when we do, we're probably pretty scared when we're at it. Like, at the core root of us, there's a lot of fear. There's like a real deep seated amount of fear. And the reason that vigilance is rooted in there is because we've seen the capacity of people that is so different than what normal civilians, normal creatures that walk around and mouth breathers, whatever. We've seen such a different scale of possibility of what can happen to another person when they are backed into a cage. Like when everything else is on the line, what somebody's willing to do in order to survive is unimaginable. It's truly unimaginable until you've physically seen it with your eyes and tasted it with your teeth. You have no idea what you're capable of until you're put in that moment. And so once you've seen yourself become something other than that, and you know what it takes in order to try to protect other people from that, you also want to try to insulate yourself from ever having to go through that again. And you're willing to do a lot of things that make other people uncomfortable in order to experience that, which means you burn yourself out constantly. The reason I think there's so much pain and exhaustion and frustration, and like half their brain is like you said, a scarred. So scarred is because that's overworked. It's so exhausted. There's so much fatigue, like chronic fatigue. This book, I didn't have this one at the time that I wrote that book, but this one was very helpful for me more recently. It's called A More Excellent Way, and that's written by, Dr. Henry Wright. This is called Be in Health, The Spiritual Roots of Disease and Pathways to Wholeness. And he has a whole section in here on chronic fatigue syndrome, something like that. Basically, I was reading it, and it has to deal with fear, stress, and anxiety in this like kind of triad that runs in our bodies so strategically. And this is on his unit called Teaching Unit 7, Fear, Stress, and Physiology. And he goes into multiple chemical sensitivities, environmental illnesses. He goes through a lot of cases of that. And but then he goes into a lot of fear. And just at the heart of it, like I'm going to put it super transparently. There's a stronghold of fear that takes over someone's heart when they go through this much violence. When violence has taken over your life to such an extent, it's very hard to break out of that cycle. And so it takes so little of a stress to get you there that you're kind of always perpetually in that condition orange. Like there's, condition white, which is like when you're droned out in your alpha brainwave state, staring at the screen, just like, and then you get in that condition yellow, like when you're kind of paying attention, like something pops up on your radar that you're like is moderately interesting. Probably when most of you are like driving a car, like you're genuinely paying attention a bit. And then there's condition orange, which is like something isn't right here, and I'm focused pretty vigilantly that there's something potentially going on here. And then condition red is you're like absolutely 100% all in, either fight, flight, or freeze. And then there's something called condition black, where your prefrontal cortex shuts down completely, and you're in total automaton mode. You are not thinking at all, and this is where people just get trapped in these what they call OODA loops, and you're stuck there perpetually. And so what happens with a lot of survivors or a lot of people that are fighters, they get in that state of consciousness, on that vigilance awareness all the time, and they can't turn it off. And so they get exhausted. And so this is why I'm such a huge proponent of like the remedy side of this now, with the LinenRailroad, with natural fiber garments and fresh milled flour, and then being outside and going in cold water. Like, I know it seems simple in some ways, but I can't tell you how much of a difference that's made for recovering me physiologically from so much of that exhaustion and that tension. Like, I am nowhere near as tense when I stopped wearing non-natural fibers. Like, it literally took the fight out of me in such a profound way. The first time I took off my like tactical pants, like I used to wear a firearm all the time, 24, like literally to bed. I could not have once I could legally carry a handgun, I was like, game on, son. I am never going to be caught without this thing again. And so I had that vigilance that just never turned off. And it made me always preparing for the end of the world. That was tomorrow was another avenue that finally gave me an outlet, I think, socially acceptable outlet for that, instead of just like, I'm just preparing to kill and slaughter all the people that are coming after me and my family all the time. The prepping route was kind of a more publicly acceptable version of that for guys that have, or people that have that vigilance. And so I dove down into that community and really enjoyed it a lot. But I learned at the end of it, I kind of had created an idol out of my tools to try to save me. Like I made that like my cure. And I realized ultimately it was a coping mechanism. It was not the cure. It was not what was going to satisfy me. And I started really having to rediscipline myself to be a more peaceful person. And that's not easy. And so for you as the support system, or as somebody who's considering being their spouse of somebody like that, like what Chelsea's done to help me, man, she's been steady. I don't know, consistent. She's been consistently her. You don't need to change who you are in order to support them. You also are blessed to be able to know what you're getting into and whether or not that's something you're really ready to take on. They startle easy, and I know nowhere near as much of this came out while her and I were just early on. But once we had children, it came out so much more exponentially, noticeably. It all changed for her very drastically. So she's supported me a lot. Like, making food for me is a tremendous blessing that she does in that. And the type of food that satisfies me and gives me my body, especially like the B vitamin complexes, are critical for that. And those have been really major components of it. But also when she was able to just be an ear and listen to me before we had children, she was able to do that a lot more. And she was able to just listen to me and talk to me and explain to me the differences between her life and mine. That was very helpful and a very key component to me getting to where I was. We stopped watching TV and we started listening to each other, and it made a critical amount of difference. So being ready for that, whether or not you are, is important that you find that out sooner rather than later, because it's not necessarily going to get better. It might get a lot worse before it gets better.
Thank you for that. Thank you too for your question. That was a really good question. I'm going to go back up to the top. TJ asked, how's his family doing? So speaking of your family, do you want to share how everybody's getting along these days?
Like my wife and children, family?
Yeah.
They're,
yeah,
I
they
mean,
put a heart face next to it, so I don't think they're meaning the family like you.
The mafia. I don't know how the mafia is these days. Hopefully hiding. I don't know. Running. No, they're doing well. You know, Naomi and Jubilee are crushing life. They're thriving, and man, Naomi is like, she kind of reminds me of like a young woman now. She's wearing my daughter Jubilee, her sister Pearl, who's like a 6-month-old, her twin, and she's wearing her in like a baby carrier like we are today, and she's just like profoundly different. You know, I'm starting to see she wants to be a mom, and she's like growing into that beautifully and powerfully, and she's very similar to Chelsea. We thought she would have that super chutzpah warriorness to her, and she does in a way, but it's very momly and it's beautiful and it's sweet. Jubilee is just incredible. She is like, I call her my plum sauce. She's like that. She's just sweet and lovely and pleasant and happy about life. You know, she's a beautiful, beautiful little girl, and I love her so much. And this morning, I was having a hard morning, you know. Obviously, it's not a super ideal time of year. And it's not something I can communicate readily to them, nor do I think I even realized it until somebody told me I was going to do another interview, and they were like, you know, it's the devil's night or something like that. I'm like, oh, hey, sure enough, it is, you know, but I literally didn't really realize that till tonight. I don't necessarily look at calendars and have to operate that same way as everybody else. And so that was noticeable. But and Chelsea's doing great. She's like on day 39 of cold water plunging. There's a creek that's near us, and we've been cold water plunging. She's on day 39, and she's like a different person. She's got her vision back, and her neurological ability has come up like unbelievably so. She is so vibrant, and she's doing so much better. Abraham and Pearl they're babies. You know, they're awesome, but they're difficult. They don't sleep super well, and that sucks. So there's that. You know, they're twins. They're hilarious, and they're wonderful when they're awake and they're not screaming. It's great. But other times they're screaming and it's just awful and I want to die. It's like that.
That's funny. The next question was, is he still doing the coffee business? So obviously people read your book, they know, but maybe you want to explain about that and talk about if you're still into that right now.
You know, I still have Organo. Yes, I still have that as like a business thing that's out there. I don't promote it anymore. I made a choice about, I don't know, 4 years ago, whether to pursue ministry much more strongly or to continue to pursue the Organo and growing my business side of it. And I chose ministry. There is no way around it. When you go into that world, there's people that like to cater my message. I've been gifted with the ability to speak and communicate, and there's people who want me to not talk about this side of my life when I do that, especially in business worlds. They don't like my testimony side of this, especially. They don't mind me talking about it a little bit, but not too much, you know, and I really don't do well when people try to muzzle me. I'm not good for that world. So, that being said, it was wonderful experience, and it taught me a ton about business that I still have used all throughout in the last few years, but it's not something I'm actively working on growing. But I still love the products, and they still are beneficial, and there's still people that buy it, and it's a way that people support us through that, and which is fantastic, and it's been a beneficial thing for me, and I'm grateful for it. So there you go.
So maybe in the near future you can do ministry and have a coffee shop and put them together.
Come on, can I just tell you something? I'll totally tell you all something. This is super exciting. So
you heard
like,
it here first.
I love coffee, right? Obviously, I'm fanatical. Now I'm really obsessed with like mold-free coffees. Always have been. That was like my big venue in the beginning was Bulletproof Coffee and their mycotoxin stuff, and that just fascinated me. So I've been on a quest though to find alternatives to coffee, not just like because I love coffee, I'm still going to do it, but other ones like Yaupon, which is like a native plant in North America that grows caffeine inside it, which is wonderful. And all these other teas and medicinal plants I got obsessed with because like I found nature to be healing, like wild cherry bark and white oak bark. And so like that's what I brew up constantly now. Like there's a linden leaf and echinacea and golden seal, feverfew, peppermint. I just got like 40 or 50 different things inside this cup, and I just steep it for 10 to 15 minutes on boiling high heat. They call it cowboy coffee where I come from, but I'd love to do that with medicinal teas and wild harvested barks, and it's awesome. Y'all, it will invigorate you way better than a cup of Starbucks death coffee. I am telling you, you will feel like so invigorated. If you go to like a natural Whole Foods place and you go to their like apothecary section where all the like wild herbs are, just type in the name of them. If you don't know what they are, you're like, I have no idea what wild cherry bark is used for, you know, or I don't know what licorice root is for. But like just Google that word, search that word with medicinal benefits, medicinal uses, and you'll be like, wow, there's so many that are immune boosting, and like honey locust bark and sycamore bark and all these trees that are around us that we don't even know what they are. We're just like some kind of green stuff that's out there. You can shave that bark into a pile and then throw it in a pot of boiling water and you will feel amazing. And so, yes, long-term goal, I would love to be able to start Bark Coffee in little Bark bags. I wanted to ship those out in our little LinenRailroad stuff. And that's one of those little sneaky treasures we tuck in there for people. So I just smuggle some of that across. I like to mail that out to people really unsuspectingly. They don't know what's in there, and I don't know what's in there because I just throw so many things in there by then. It's a mystery bag, but have a good time.
I have a holistic herbalist who does that. So I'm going to share her link too. Just that way you can see even for future. If
Heck
you
yeah.
that. But to going off of that is I'm going to go to Lisa's question. She said, I was
just going to ask that. Yep.
Yeah. If you had to do it again, would you have shared what was going on with your wife sooner?
Probably not. If I was real honest, there was a level of maturing that she had to go through as well. I don't know. Like I probe. I was talking about that question earlier when you're asking about the pagan holidays and stuff. I probe like crazy. I'm like, the fighter is always in there. You know what I mean? And you're always trying to evaluate whether or not people's strengths and weaknesses are ready for the fight. Truth be told, that's all I'm looking. The only thing I'm ultimately looking for in every single person I ever meet is whether or not they're capable of enduring the battle that's ahead, you know, and whether if they are, great. Like let's talk about it and let's join forces and work heartily to try to contend for this great war of the ages that we are all in. But if they're not, why bother? You know, I've seen what happens when you bring people to the edge of insanity by trying to tell them too much, too soon, too fast. You know, I've seen it. I'm a living witness of like the most ridiculous, horrible atrocities that can ever be committed on a person in reality. And so there's a lot of people who don't want anything to do with that. And when it's the person that you're most intimately connected with and the person that has the most potential power to hurt you and destroy you and wound you and crush you or build you up and strengthen you and give you courage and conviction and hope, yeah, you tread carefully. Would it have been beneficial? I think in some ways, absolutely. I would have loved to have told her sooner. However, I don't know that I could have at the end of the day. There's still way too much fear of rejection.
Well, and I think that there's a like hindsight's always 2020. So you look back and you're like, well, yeah, that's why I love your answer, because it's really honest. It's oh, it's not I wish I would have, because now she knows and it's easier. It's no, she wasn't ready and I wasn't ready at that point. We had to wait till that was ready. That was at that point to talk about. And so no, I really love that. That was a great answer to that, because a lot of people would just assume, well, of course I would. And it's like, well, but I wasn't ready to do that yet. And she wasn't ready to hear it.
Well, too, and with that, you have to remember of even triggering one another. And as stuff is coming up, even for you, Nathan, as you're going through your healing journey, how that affected her. And then if it triggered her in her healing aspect, so even the maturity of the relationship as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%. And speaking of triggers, I had a question up here. Does he still struggle with triggers? So if you want to answer that, and then maybe Nathan, if you could talk about the things that you have healed with your triggers, how did you get through that process, and what sort of, when a trigger comes up, what do you do and how have you healed from those?
Yeah, I run into cold water now. I'm not kidding. It's genuinely the most effective thing I have found to reset myself. That's not lots of drugs and violence, you know? It's because, so like, for those of you that don't know, I used substances to self-regulate myself for a very long time. And so that had been such an intimate part of my management strategies. I mean, to cope with everything, right? And sleep was another major one that was utilized, like trying to take naps to like switch or to like reset myself, in a sense, was a way to deal with triggers. That can be helpful, but it's not always practical. You know, like when you're driving down the road, that's super unpractical and really, really difficult, but it happens. And so, but I would say, like, yeah, do I still have triggers? Absolutely. And I think some of them I don't even realize until like I'm in there. And so many of them now are rooted with child rearing. Like a big one that is really difficult for me is people not eating their food. Like that's so crazy. It's like not being appreciative for their food. Like my children have not starved. So they don't have like a genuine appreciation to eat what's in front of them with just gratitude. I've never complained for a meal Chelsea's made me. Like, I'm a very easy husband on that one point. On that regard, I'm super splendidly easy. I've seen other men just totally whine at their wives over their meals and over their, like, I don't know, ridiculous. They don't starve enough. And so, like, that's a really difficult one I really struggle with still, is people that don't have a gratitude for eating, you know, for the food that's placed in front of them, and then for just food and clothing and shelter. It's really hard. I really struggle with that with raising my children, is that they don't have a gratitude for basic life in a way that I'm so thankful to experience life. I'm really struggle to experience child rearing, though. This side of it is very difficult, because I see I'm giving them such a different life than what I had, that to me, gratitude should be the only response, in a sense. You know, it's not realistic. I get that. But I still, in my head, thought there would only be gratitude. You know, I don't know. I'm not great at raising my children. I think I do a fair job at it, but I'm not great at it. It's really hard. It's not easy. I should just say it that way. Most of everything I do in my life is easy. Like, there's very little that really challenges me. This challenges me more than anything else I've gone through in a long time. And so when my babies are screaming right now, like, I have twins. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. Like, Chelsea literally just said this tonight when we're going to put the twins down. Like, this is crazy. We didn't ask for this. You know, I kind of prayed half-heartedly, like, being like, oh, maybe, Father, you know, let's give us dualies. Why don't you just give us twins? Let's just get it two done all at once. That was
stupid. I watched that video.
Yeah,
you
I said that.
Asked for it.
I did ask for this. I asked for this, and I remind myself of that right now when my son wakes up 23 times in a night, you know, and you're like, God, I just sleep.
Especially when they act like you, and you're like, why, God, did you need to give me myself?
They're super frustrating. You know, it's definitely, those are some of my biggest triggers. Honestly, it's just stuff that pops up when I'm raising my children that I would have never even thought about, Emma, because I would have spent my entire life avoiding it. You know, I was really happy to just go live in caves the rest of my life. I really would do that. I still would. The day I find the underground again, I'm in, man. Like, I will just gone. But the only reason I'm here on the surface dwelling side of life at all is because I have a family. That's it. I love them. I'm thankful for them. But at the same time, there's still a core tenet of me that ultimately struggles with the commitment side of child rearing and marriage and life that is very permanent. That's very uneasy, unsettling, because I'm very stuck. I feel very stuck raising children. And that's a big challenge that I think most parents have to overcome. Most adults have to overcome, is laying down your life, your wants, your desires, your dreams for them to have better. Like, Naomi and Jubilee are taking horse riding lessons, and I wanted to do that so bad my entire life. And I always used to go with my sister as she got horse riding lessons, and it just killed me that I wasn't allowed to do it myself. It killed me. And so I'm like, I want to make their dreams come true. I want them to be successful. I want them to be exponentially more capable of thriving in this world than I ever was. And so there is a massive amount of dying to my wants and my dreams and my desires in order to get there. Like, I want somebody else to raise my twins. That's like, I want a nanny or something like that. Somebody else that'll deal with all of the constant screaming and the babies, you know? So, but I think that's, it's like a normal parent thing too. Just like, I just want a nap, you know? You're like, I'm just tired and cranky. Like, this is why parents get just pissed off. Never mess with a parent. They'll cut your throat, man. Don't mess with them. They're tired. They're way tired than you. So,
and even though you want to sell your kids, try and talk about them bad, and then we'll hurt you.
That's right. I mean, there's still Mama Bear, and they'll still tear your throats out. So it's good. But yeah, those are some of my biggest triggers. Other people still try to do some of my other triggers. Like, this area of Missouri is full of a bunch of like mind control psychopathic handlers and stuff. And people will still come up behind me and try to grope my shoulders like a pedophile did. Like, they still will come up and do me and whisper weird words in my ears and like passphrases in my ears, like just ridiculous garbage stuff. And so I still have to deal with that, but that stuff doesn't trigger me in the same way. None of that stuff like works like it used to. The other triggers, most of the triggers that come up is just raising a family triggers, you know?
I can appreciate that. I have 2 teenage boys, so they're crazy. So one of the other questions we had from Rose says, in your book, you mentioned many dark events and dark places, her words. Did Chelsea ever have a curiosity to see some of the places you have been, the specific places?
She did. So when I went and filmed a lot of it down with Tom Dunn just before the week before I published my book. We went and filmed a bunch of this stuff, and she watched some of that with me, but I don't know if she has a strong desire to see it. She's more sensitive. She's a way more sensitive person, and it's not like at the time. I would say also most of her tolerance was a lot lower to a lot of this stuff. She didn't have as much maturity when it came to being able to endure it. She wasn't as tempered. She just couldn't. She wasn't hard enough yet, you know. And now it doesn't bother her near as much. She is so much more capable now of being able to endure it and experience it and see these dark places. Like I always used to want to go. Like I can find ritual sites like I'm smelling for a burger. Like I can walk into the woods and find places where people have been murdered and tortured. Like it's nothing. It calls to me everywhere I go all over this country. So I'll go for a hike in the woods and find satanic crosses and mutilated bodies of animals and stuff like in minutes. And she's just like, I don't understand this. I don't know why. Like I'm drawn to it. I can find it and I want to just, and for me, a big part of that is then praying and interceding in those sites, asking for forgiveness of the sins committed in those places, and that those doors that have been opened would be shut, and that there would be freedom for the victims of this in that place. But she is definitely not as interested in seeing it. She doesn't need to see it, if that makes sense. She's willing to weigh into it if it's important to me. Some of it, it's important for me to let her see it so she can understand it. But that's not necessarily something she's as interested in.
Another question, the people that read your book, is there somebody that has their thing on? Hold on. I'm hearing some noise.
I think I got it.
Okay. For people that read your book, there was some really emotional parts in that book about a girl named Suze. And somebody asked if you have heard from or ever found her.
I have not. Nope, not yet.
That part of the book, oh my goodness. And like I said, you guys, if you guys didn't listen to Nathan actually narrate the book, oh my gosh, if you thought that those chapters were hard to read just in the book, you should hear Nathan read it. Oh my gosh, I had to stop a couple times. I was like, all right.
Yeah, that sucked. I'll be honest, I was narrating that book down on a farm working as like a migrant worker, and I would get up at 3 in the morning to read that in like the living room of my RV. And I would pull down my toaster oven and set up pillows and read it into there. And that was the first time I'd read my book since I'd written it and edited it, you know. That was horrible, trying to read that, and then I would edit it. I released a chapter a day for 48 days. I did that whole thing in like a month and a half. And that was brutal. That was excruciating. Trying to like relive and redeal with all that stuff. That section is excruciating to read. And I know there's a lot of people that stop right in that section and they don't pick up the book again. And I get it, but it's really important. And yeah, I'm glad you listened to it, because it's different. It's different. It was different recording it. And I'm very thankful that I accomplished that and I got that done, but I don't want to do it again, if that makes sense. So I appreciate anybody that works their way through that section and gets through the book.
Well, even going off of that, can you share, even as you, because not too many authors, it's hard to write the book and face and relive all of that trauma. But can you share even the journey of reading that and sharing, because so many can't even get through reading their own book, and there's so many emotions that come up with that and re-triggered. So even just you processing, reading it out loud, and thank you for sharing the raw emotions with us and having that aspect for so many people, because it does hit differently when you hear a survivor's voice. It's one thing to read it, but when you hear the author actually reading it, and what so many people I think forget is when you're reading that out loud, you're re-triggering yourself, but all of the emotions that come with that as well. So you're giving us your raw emotions in that, and as well as triggering yourself while reading it.
Yeah, it was horrible. It was horrible. It was way harder than writing the book. That's what I remember saying that consistently during the time. And I didn't have time to process any of it. at all. Because I mean, I got up at 6, like my family was waking up at 6 a.m. You know, they were paper wall thin. It sounds like why I'm whispering in that book is because my walls are made of dust. You know, like I didn't have doors. Like really, I had a cardboard sack for a door basically, and it was like I had to stuff that emotion and that trauma, and then I would literally get out there and I would go prune tomato vines, like sweat like my face into the earth. And I mean, I was screaming and crying in these little greenhouses and high tunnels. I was generally by myself, and I was just falling apart, you know. And I very angry, because honestly, you don't necessarily, like when you write some of this stuff, you don't necessarily know the stuff you're writing until later on. You process, and you don't process it. Like I think that's a component of it that people just don't understand, that are maybe singletons, people that have single-mindedness, that this is literally like one hemisphere of your brain that's holding the majority of these events. Like this night walker side of your brain does not have the ability to put words, to formulate words. Your one hemisphere of your brain cannot make words come out of you. So like you can communicate still, but it's not through auditory speech. And then there's another side of your brain that can communicate through speech, but cannot do other tasks. And so those are really what are the core, like explicit forms of programming that are done between a day walker, a presenting part, and then the rest of the other parts, the night walkers. And so that other side of you, when you finally like writing, is a way that you can kind of get past that, and you can suddenly get loose from those confines. But then when you're reading it and hearing it, like you said, it totally re-triggers you. And I was at the same time, I was totally devoid of like therapists or trauma counselors or any of those people. We were very isolated. And in the community that I was in, were a bunch of, you know, like natural living kind of people, but not people that knew me at all. They didn't know about my ministry. Like I was very concealed. I didn't have a giant sticker on my RV then that said Nathan Reynolds and the LinenRailroad. None of that. Like none of that. I didn't want anybody to really know what was going on, but it slowly kind of percolated out. And then eventually, like I gave a book to one person at the farm, and then it kind of spreads out. And it's really difficult because I was releasing the book contemporaneous with just trying to deal with, like, we had another baby at the time, and Jubilee was, I think, 6 months old then, right about what my babies are at right now. And it was way easier because she was just more chill of a baby. Like Pearl, my youngest daughter, she's super chill. She's just so content. She's so sweet. She's so wonderful. Abraham is like a thunderclap. You know, he's just unreal. He's gigantic. He's so massive and he's so loud. It's like scary like me, you know, what the heck? It's just reality. But Chelsea was able to take care of Jubilee way more. She was wearing Jubilee all the time. She was wearing her into greenhouses. She was harvesting tomatoes. She was working as like a farmhand while doing all these tasks that, you know, taking care of our RV and our home and feeding us and all that. And I was trying to just do this book, and I was trying to upload it and trying to like deal with all this stuff. And I was having to go to the farm owner's house to upload this stuff, and then trying to keep it secret from him at the same time, like trying to release these things and get into the chats and having handlers and psychos in the chat at times. Like it's such a minefield trying to navigate this world, y'all, of sharing your testimony out publicly. And you don't know how many people are for you and how many are against you. And so you're trying to like inspect everyone's fruit simultaneously, and you're trying to vet out who are the allies and who are the enemies all the time. And so all that like hyper vigilance, that's why it's so good for warriors to get a fight, because there's a great battlefield out here, and it's really good. And it's just a lot more effective than bullets ever were. You know, at the end of the day, I did that work years ago, and I feel like I'm only recently starting to reap the rewards of that and starting to see a lot of the fruit from that. And people now have access to that information. Like I give my that audiobook away for free, and I've always wanted people to have access to that because it costs a lifetime to live it, you know. But it's not for me. It's the lives of those survivors. It's the lives of the victims. It's the lives of all of these people who have hopelessly, helplessly walked through this and never got an opportunity to give their voice to the nations. You know, I'm very blessed that I can share. I'm very blessed that there's people that are willing to listen, and that there's tools and technology that enabled me an opportunity to speak when so many were silenced. And so I'm thankful for that. And it's very painful, but it's worth it. You know, everything in this life comes at a cost.
Well, I know I speak on behalf of everybody in this room, all 30 some of us, that you have had such a tremendous impact on all of us, and all of us can't thank you enough for your courage to speak out, because, you know, not many do. I had a really good question here too, going through the chat from Sharisa. Hi, Sharisa. If you guys don't know Sharisa, she's absolutely amazing. She's a podcaster also, and such a beautiful advocate for survivors. She said, Nathan, what kind of spiritual warfare, if any, do you currently do or have you done against the orders and groups that you were raised and trained under, the areas you live in or travel to where you see covenant brotherhood activity?
Good question. Teresa,
Really?
you're a warrior. That's a good question. There's somebody on the front line right there. Man, I think that asking for everything hidden to be revealed is one of the most powerful prayers you can ever start praying, is asking for the secret things to be revealed and what's done in the dark to be brought to the light. And then asking for the forgiveness of sins that have been committed in an area is unbelievable. That single prayer releases so much pressure a lot of times that you're experiencing. Sometimes you'll walk through an area, you'll drive through an area, and that it will feel so funky. It'll feel so unwell. Like there's a reason, like, so I'm taking my daughters out for field trips. Let's just call it that. I'm trying to teach them about how to navigate the world without having to necessarily participate in the same system. So I'm showing them how we do terrain mapping. And like Russ Dizdar is one of the best people I encourage folks to go to his shatterthedarkness.net. And on there, he has a training tab. He's got free courses, it says on there. And he's got thousands of hours of tutorials and training, and mapping out the occult powers of the area is critical. He has a book, basically a little tiny journal that's called Spiritual Mapping a Territory. And you just start learning to walk around and asking these things to be revealed of what's going on in that area, and then asking the Father to go ahead and start to bring, I don't know, understanding to the hearts of the people that are there. Start praying for the victims that are in that area to find healing and restoration, and then start asking for these things to be shut down. I do not believe it's our place to go around praying down principalities and powers and thrones. You got to be super careful when you start trying to engage in higher level spiritual warfare. I'll tell you, most people are going to get their lives utterly destroyed if they have any doors open to the enemy. Like major critical component to this is you don't go and engage in this type of warfare like on a very strategic front until you have done your diligence to try to safeguard your life in a spiritual way, that like you've sought to purify your life in a serious way. I say that because there's sometimes folks will get eager and excited to go and jump into this stuff, but you must, I think his series is called Confronting the Powers. That's a really good one for those of you that are wanting to do that. It's called Confronting the Powers, shatterthedarkness.net. That series goes through dealing with maybe the hierarchical structure that's necessary to understand how what you're dealing with in different territories. So like one of the main things I'm looking for when I go out is what are the fruits. I can know every tree by the fruits that are hanging out there. So like when I want to find out what are the strongholds, I want to find out what are the strongest spiritual powers in an area, I go and look for the fruits of it. Like, so when you drive into certain parts of town, you're going to find drugs as a serious stronghold in a given territory, and addiction, and that heaviness of violence and theft will be over certain territories, very intimately connected. You'll go into other areas and it's pride and it's vanity and it's keeping up with the Joneses, and it's like the gods of mammon, like it's the absolute quest for the almighty dollar. And then you go into other areas and you're going to start to deal with greed, very pernicious greed, in other areas where it's power. It's pure power games, and it's politicking, diplomacy, and it's subterfuge, and it's deception and a spirit of seduction, like in those religious spirits. And so like you can start to really identify these things if you just go into a territory and ask those things to be revealed, and you will blow your mind what kind of people will walk up to you and start talking to you when you start asking that kind of stuff. I have had the very criminals of this earth walk up and confess out of their mouths what they're doing in the most explicit detail, like they had a truth serum put into them. And it's a real thing, because a lot of these people are desperate to be understood. And a lot of them are desperate to vindicate and justify their lifestyle and their choices and actions. And so if you're willing to be honest with people and transparent with them and be sincere with them, it can make a huge difference. So when dealing with like that in a territory that I go to, that's some of the stuff I start praying for, though. And the prayers that are in the very back of my book, those of you that have my book, at the very end of it is the resources section. And on my website, I also, there's a resources tab, and it has these prayers from Dr. Michael Lake and Mary Lou that were printed in her book. I believe they're printed in this one. What Witches Don't Want Christians to Know. Still one of my most highly recommended reads. Another account from a survivor that's one of the best written descriptions of that. And she's also in the Ozark areas of Missouri. And so right now, like Chelsea just read this book for the first time. And there's so much information about this area that we are like, oh my gosh, this makes so much more sense about what's going on out here. This book and their ministry, her and her husband, Dr. Michael Lake, their website is Kingdom Intelligence Briefing. They do a tremendous job at putting out prayer resources. Like this stuff made a critical difference for me. The morning prayer, their evening prayer, and their prayer for trauma and fragmentation, their prayer for generational curses from Freemasonry. Like I talked about that a bit in the book. These were huge, like huge. I can't tell you enough. The one on trauma and fragmentation, I feel like genuinely helped to safeguard my mind. These are still like my daily prayer stuff, y'all. This is still stuff I'm very vigilant at and disciplined at because it makes a major difference at helping to safeguard myself and safeguard my family and then help me to navigate these inky waters of day-to-day life. So those are in there for a reason, y'all. Like those and those recommended reads that are right there on that other page. Like I didn't put that in there for nothing, y'all. Like these are critically powerful tools and I recommend them for a reason.
So one of the questions, there may have been one above, but that worked with what you were just talking about, so I wanted to ask it. Is Missouri more of a hotbed of SRA than other states?
I don't know about that. I don't know. I find it stinking everywhere. I'll just be super honest. I just think maybe a higher concentration of it. There's more of a military mind control thing and druidic stuff. There's a whole bunch of druidic and KKK style like mind control groups. Like, I don't know. I just find they're filthy fruit all over the place. You know, I don't know. Maybe I'm a magnet for it, or maybe I'm very vigilant and I know where to find it or how to dig. But it's definitely very saturated. I feel like the Ozarks in some ways are like kind of like Canaan in the Promised Land, where all of the great iniquity, all of like the necromancers and like the child sacrificers and all of like the worst evil of evil giants and these hybrid tribes had invaded to prepare to resist an occupying force coming in. Like they tried to build up an army to fight back against the children of Israel coming in. And they put the most seditious, disgusting matters all over the land to abominate it and to try to supernaturally charge the landscape with like so much bloodshed and violence and demonic activities so as to resist the people of righteousness coming in. And I feel like that's big time in Missouri, a huge stronghold of polygamous cults. There's sexual immorality and like adultery saturates this area out here. I don't know why that's its main thing out here, but that is one of the biggest strongholds that I have found in this region is there is a desire for people to engage in major sexual depravity, but with a thick smear of Christianese all over it. So Branson is a super stronghold for that. Springfield is another one. Fort Leonard Wood is a major hub for all of that. And then St. Louis and Kansas City, but those are massive centers of it in this region. And so it's funky, but it's spiritually, I'll say this, the Ozarks are spiritually one of the most peaceful places I have ever lived. Like I feel like the spiritual powers that are in this region are in our favor, if that makes sense. There's definitely funkiness, but it's much more isolated. It's much more contained. Whereas Colorado has massive arenas of it. Same with a lot of other states that I've been to, like down in Florida. There's wholesale regions of states and territories that are just dripping in it, like Memphis, Tennessee, and there's some really dark centers of our nation. And this is not necessarily, I don't feel like that same experience out here in the Ozarks.
Yep, you're muted.
Sorry, you guys.
I was gonna say, I don't even want to ask about Phoenix because I know that that's probably horrid.
Dang right.
I know.
You know it's bad, girl. Tucson too.
Oh yeah, all around.
My next question for you, Nathan, and that's funny, Leah from Tucson, Arizona, speaking of
Get
Tucson.
them, Leah. Resistance force.
She said, Nathan, in regards to the foreword of your book, could you speak more to decipher the text, use the clue, and follow the breadcrumbs?
Heck yeah. Do any of you know what a book cipher is? You can just raise your hand, I guess, because I can see you. Do you know what a book cipher is? If not, this is super fun. I'll just teach you real quick. Okay. So like I love codes and writing cryptic messages, but I don't like to make it super complicated. So I'll just tell you all super transparently. A book cipher is where you can write a coded message that nobody else can decrypt unless they have the exact book that you're holding in order to do that with. And so in order to do that, you need to standardize a communication choice. So you need to choose a book in order to do that. And so you can write a letter, like, let's say, for example, you wanted to use my book to do that, right? This first edition. So you could say you needed to write out. This is a tedious task, y'all, which is good for toddlers, right? If those of you don't have toddlers, they think this wonderful thing. Let me just save you a lot of life. We call them tedious tasks for toddlers, where you give them like a bucket of beans and a tiny little cup and then a spoon. And you say, I want you to fill up this cup with the spoon and these beans. All these parents be all shaking their heads like, yeah, that's right. And this tedious task. Well, this is a tedious task, okay? And it's good for you. But it will teach you a deliberateness of writing a message to somebody else in a very precise way. But you start out by you write down your message, okay, in normal English, if that's how you communicate, and then you start to encode it, okay? And so in order to do that, you could go to the page number. You would write like the page number. Say you wanted the letter T, okay? So I could use this T right at the very beginning of this. Let's go to a different one. Let's just say the very, I'm going to use this T down here at the very bottom corner here, all right, from the word the. And I want to use that one. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the page number. So you would write a 4, and then you would count the lines, okay, for your next one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Then you would put an 18. Then you'd count how many words from left to right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So then the 14th word. So your code would be 4, 18. What was my last number? I want somebody help me out. I forgot it. 14, maybe? They're all smiling like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And then you're like, the. Oh, the is the first word. Yes. Then you go ahead and you write your next code phrase. So this is how you can build a book cipher text, y'all. And I wanted to try to do that. And so originally, originally there's going to be a secret section on my website. There still may be one. That when you unlock the code, you can type that code in there, and it unlocks all of these other databases and archives for people that have broken the code and are trying to build a research database to organize an action plan against these agents of evil. So that's why that's there. Now, some of the people I wrote this book for, y'all, just be super transparent, are they swing in a very different weight class than I do when it comes to cryptography. And they communicate through secret messages. And so I wanted a way for them to be able to communicate with me and for them to understand that I wrote this book because I'm trying to also talk to these brothers of mine from these projects and from these horrible places of the assassin teams that I don't know how to communicate with them any other way than making a huge, giant public screaming match out to the nation so I can get their attention so they can hear that there's a way out if any of them want it. I don't know if they do, or that there's a whole other war they can fight in if they want to as well, and we need their help. So we need all the allies we can get, y'all. We need all those folks who are trapped behind enemy lines to become double agents and start serving the kingdom of truth. And but that doesn't mean they have to ruin their cover in order to do so. So that's a way that people can send coded messages to me or to other people that they might want to, and you can tie them around the feet of your carrier pigeon flock. If you don't have one, you should start one. It's awesome. There's a guy whose name is James Owen on YouTube, Living Ferociously with James Owen. He is totally doing that, and I highly recommend you all go ahead and make your own flocks because it's hilarious, and then you can raise birds for an excuse to smuggle messages and have a great time.
You guys are asking some awesome questions. I'm loving this. Next question. Nate, why do some survivors choose to keep altars and not integrate? Is it spiritually dangerous to invite natural law?
I don't, is this a singleton asking a question like that? Kind of sounds like it. I don't know. You know, integration is an idol in the field of survivorship, in my opinion. I think that there's definitely precedence that's put on that as the end goal that may not be the reality for a lot of survivors until they are given a new body. I don't know. I think that there's an idealistic form of it that, yeah, I've tried to pursue that. I've gone through all different kinds of like counseling methodologies trying to get there, and I've found some success, but I've also found some incredible heartache and pain and suffering from trying to force things together that maybe are a major mismatch at this stage of my life. And that might just be something that takes a lot longer. I think there's a possibility for some that integration can happen way more readily and way more quickly. There was integration for large components of my personality that happened really rapidly. And then there seemed to be like a delineation, like I don't know. I still feel like there's some major incongruencies between aspects of myself that make it very difficult to maintain wholeness and integrity. That there is there is such a readiness to separate and dissociate again and like go through the re-traumatization pattern and use dissociation as a tool to escape my circumstances, that it's very easy for me to just split off again and again in that sense. So I think there's some who don't have maybe as complex of a system. Gosh, it's such an uncomfortable word to say. That there's such a complexity to their system, and then there's others that it is so complex and so diverse that it takes a tremendous amount of effort to try to bring things into cohesion. And honestly, you can sometimes work a lot more effectively without integration in order to function. And, you know, that's way more familiar. It's like you didn't get here overnight, and it's not really comfortable going back down that road. I went through a counseling process up in Ohio with some folks that really had no idea what they were getting into and were messed around with my system horribly. And it jacked me up for like 6 months to where I was ruined. It jacked me up so horribly because they tried to just shove everything basically back together. And it destroyed me. It destroyed me so bad. Like, I thought I lost the Holy Spirit. Like, I thought I was completely helpless. I've never been so depressed in my entire life. It was because like everything was stuck together all at once, and it was miserable only continually. Like, it sucked so bad. At least there's some level of like joy in my soul, you know, but not all of me is like that. A lot of me is still just on a perpetual quest to just tear the entire earth down to its foundations, you know, and that's really incongruent with like a happy dad going on horseback riding lessons. So there's that, you know. People just frown on that these days. There's just such a soggy culture without the whole death side of things and war side.
I mean, I don't know. I'm ready for you to tear the whole thing down. So
working on the army, recruit all the time.
Oh man. So speaking of army, what is your estimation for the number of people who are currently programmed worldwide, whether they know it or not?
Oh, tens of millions easily.
Ugh.
I mean, and I'm not talking about just like general broad-based programming that everyone's subjected to from the day of their birth. Like I'm talking about like systemic, intentional, strategic, deliberate, outside agencies, evil actors working to use dark occult sciences, occult neurosciences to program and handle people in the tens of millions of people easily. I mean, just y'all, for a casebook example of this, like the Jason projects, the Jason program, which is used still from 1989, started by Robert Ballard. Like, this is designed to pair children with handlers and use like gifted and talented projects to start handling children and placing them in different areas. That one's had back in the decades ago, they were cranking out millions of them. Right now they have 5 million a year that go through that program. Okay. How many? That's just children in the United States. I'm not talking about abroad. This is millions and millions of children who are going through that one, which was founded by naval intelligence officers exclusively for these reasons. This is purely a project to work through finding ways to manipulate and create mind-controlled slaves. That's just one little arena, y'all, of this entire system. So that's not even touching the Roman Catholic system. That's not even touching the Mormon side of this. That's not even touching the multi-generational sides of the Luciferian sides of this. That's not even addressing the cartel member sides of this, the mafia sides of this. That's not even touching these various organized crime families that do this stuff, let alone all of the other various creepy cults that are everywhere, all over this world. This entire society is so systemically infiltrated with agents of evil that are doing this and are trained in it. And it's becoming so much more mainstream, like publicly talked about and readily accessible information, that a closet occultist can suddenly go and engage in this stuff and weaponize psychology and start to use sorcery and invocation to handle people. So this is growing at such a rapid rate that the truth is, this is why we are in a fight for our absolute lives, because every day the enemy is making recruits and they are growing in number continually. And we need people that are a lot more deliberate and educated, who are capable of resisting this and putting up a well-articulated discussion and being able to way into the fray and fight back against this.
Absolutely. That was a really good question too. The next question, are there authors who have influenced your writing style?
I don't know. I'm sure most of them do at some point to some level. Anybody that you read that's like got a good writing style is going to wear off on you. Yeah. I've read a lot of books. Like that was books were my escape early on. Books were my absolute escape. And so like I would read hundreds of books in when I was 12 and 13, I read 600 books a year for 2 years in a row. Like I love books and I just devoured books, every kind I could get my hands on. I just lived in the libraries, reading books, and that changed when I went into the military. That changed when I was, in college. They made me read all these garbage, worthless things, and it killed a lot of my joy for reading. And so it wasn't until I kind of broke out of that and was able to just start self-learning again that I got that joy and that passion back in from me. But I loved encyclopedias like a freak show. I love reading like this one. Let me show you this.
I always love when Nathan gives us his examples. It's the best.
Y'all, this is where I started. This was my favorite. I just found this at a thrift store and I like cried because this is the one I started with as a young man.
That looks
like
like
when
a fantastic
I
book.
loved this book. This is where I developed a love for nature in such a powerful way. This is a Reader's Digest, Nature in America. I don't know, 1980s or something. Maybe this was put out 1976. Let's see, 1991. So this one is like, it's beautifully illustrated. There's just pertinent pieces of information about all kinds of a variety of things. And I'm just an innately curious person. And so this is one that just scratched my itch tremendously. And so many of the quests of like my treasure hunting in my life that I've been going around all over this country and doing is because of this, is because I read about this stuff when I was young. And this was like, it fascinated. And the way my mind works, like I just talked to a husband of a survivor, which was awesome. By the way, it was totally different to get to talk to a husband of somebody who is like me, but that person was not necessarily like me. That was really helpful. And he said that his wife, he put it perfectly. He said his wife is a constant collector of information. Like she collects every little bit of information and it's all cataloged there forever. And I was like, that's how my mind works. I don't have the same generalized intelligence that like maybe some IQ tests would test for. I don't necessarily excel in some scholastic things, but I collect information meticulously and it just doesn't go away. And like stuff I read, like I knew the page numbers of some of my favorite pages on this before, as soon as I touched it, and was like, yes, it's like seeing an old friend. These were my friends. Books were my friends because people were monsters and I wanted them all to die. So they all influenced me. You betcha. And I don't know that anyone in particular influenced me more or more profoundly. There's nobody that I can think of in particularities, writing style that just was like, I liked books. I liked reading, and I liked to find books that were real visceral.
Great question, and thanks for the transparency. Shifting to a couple of people want to know your thoughts on the churches, and one of the questions was, what about churches? You were raised, as many others, in Christian churches and schools. Is there any way to fight that or know when the leadership in a church is evil?
Yes. There is knowing how you got to become a fruit inspector. You literally do. Y'all should spend some time going to a farm and learning how to inspect fruit. I'm dead serious. I know it sounds ridiculous. You should watch videos on it. Just learn how to inspect people's fruit. You have to learn how to understand what people's motives are. Their who, the when, the why, the there. Like you need to understand who done it. What is motivating these people? What is like the heart of their life, and what are their relationships like? The best thing that you can ever inspect on any ministry's fruit is their children. Ultimately, at the end of the day, there's this thing in Christian culture which is called PKs, pastor kids. And they are either there's someone smiling super big. Somebody knows PK language right there. And the pastor kids are either notoriously the worst, most rebellious, awful children there are, or they're wonderful. And there's no in between. They are 100% committed to rebel, or there's 100% committed to the kingdom. And that is really indicative of a lot of the fruits of what's going on in there. So that's one area that you can diligently inspect, that I would encourage everyone that you have a duty to do that for. You don't owe any church anything. There is no religion of the church in the Bible. I read it very diligently. It's all about a kingdom. It's all about two kingdoms, y'all. And that's the predominant fight of your life. And now that's not to say that we don't have a wonderful blessing and an opportunity to participate in fellowship among churches, if that's something that you're interested in. I tend to have a little bit of a struggle in that wherever I go, I will inevitably find people's dirty laundry and all of the skeletons that are there, whether they're good, bad, or terribly dark. It's an inevitability. And I like going to some of those places, but I don't necessarily get along very well after a good long while in there, because I tend to find the fruits of hypocrisy really repugnant, and it's really disgusting. That's not to say that everyone's like that. There's some wonderful churches. I'm going to be doing an interview with a guy named Richard Mole, who has an international ministry, and they literally, he was the first Christian church that invited me to speak at their church, and they invited me like 3 or 4 times to speak there. I have a playlist called Barefoot Brawling, and a couple episodes were filmed at his church, and they opened it up to survivors. They're in Tampa, Florida. And they have survivors like crazy at that church, like awesome people. And he's wade right into that. And he's got his own ministry, because Tampa is a huge human trafficking center. And so he is deliberately, consistently fighting for the wounded sheep in that regard. So I'm not trying to always lay a total, evocation of everyone to get out of the churches. However, I think the vast majority of people are going there, are doing so in order to launder their money through a version of what they think is charity that's not actually costing them anything. You're just washing your money to get it back later on. And that's a real disgusting practice that a lot of people aren't aware. That's what the 501c3s are there to do, y'all. It's just a money laundering operation. It's not the same thing. I know that's a potential for a lot of businesses to get tax write-offs and other stuff. That's not the same as giving. Like, giving should be costly for a reason. It's totally different. Like, I've raised animals and know what it's like to give your best away. Like, for real, that's super hard. It's really hard when you actually give your best, your first and your best away of like crops that you've raised. Like, if you do that, you totally understand that it's like really costly. King David literally said, I can never give an offering that doesn't cost me anything, And so I think that they're losing a sense of understanding about their relationship with the Father if they would just go to their neighbors and get to know their brothers and sisters that are around them and start to break bread with their neighbors and break bread with one another and their families. I think honestly, that's the best way. Just go to each other's houses, y'all. You can keep your children a whole lot safer if you're in one family's house and you're not with all kinds of other predators, because they're generally in your children's ministry. They're almost always in the children's ministry and full of perverts everywhere you go, man. Just sycophantic perverts in the church constantly. They love it. That's where the devil entered in with Ananias and Sapphira, man. And Peter didn't extend forgiveness to them, by the way. It's like everyone's like, just forgive your enemies. I'm like, did Peter forgive Ananias and Sapphira? I'm pretty sure they dropped dead, and he told his wife that you're going to go be buried next to your husband. Like, savage stuff, y'all. Sometimes this is deadly stuff. And people that mess around and come into our churches and come into our most precious places, our families, and try to predate upon them, man, I pray their hearts stop. If they won't repent, I pray their hearts stop and they die profoundly, viscerally all the time. You know what I mean? These people need to die. They absolutely need to die, because they're not going to, if they won't stop, the Father knows. He knows their hearts. And if they're not going to stop, I pray their hearts stop before they touch another person. You know what I mean? Not one child more needs to suffer at the hands of these sycophants.
So going off of that, like I grew up Catholic, went to Catholic school. And so I was super intrigued with all of the stuff that you have, but I know that there are people who, again, are Christian, who are Catholic, and they don't understand the cultness of Catholicism. And I know you could probably go on forever, but can you touch on a little bit of that just to kind of wake people up, help people out?
Yeah, they're the best thing you could ever do is know where you come from. If on any religious side of any of these equations, like you have no idea the foundations of what you walked into when you're dealing with something like Roman Catholicism. This goes back for centuries, and it's a completely different doctrine and ideology than the version that that's probably masquerading in front of you whenever you go into it. I mean, basic catechisms and everything else, as you start to go through the initiatory like entrances into that. There's this book. I'll just say this one, the Illuminati Unmasked, a much better version of it that people are always tying me in like an Illuminati bloodline. This is the real Illuminati bloodlines, y'all. Like the black nobility is what they're called. And they come out of the great Roman, the Medicis, the Merovingians, and like the Orsinis. There's all these great empires, people that literally have been running the world for thousands of years. These people have a cult loyal following that is completely different, and their doctrines and their practices are based in the most depraved acts of what we would call today SRA. This is what the popes and this is what the bishops and the cardinals have been the practitioners and the overseers of that church ideology for centuries. So this is an incredible book. He also has another one. Johnny Cerrucci, by the way, is the author of this. He's got another one that's called Secret History, which goes specifically into a lot of the history of the doctrines, the ideologies, and the family rulers, the dynastic family rulers of the papal bloodlines and their practices. Like, this was just one I was reading tonight before you came on. This will be a little triggering, fair warning for those of you that are here. But this one is called The Eaters of Children. This is an even better one, The Pedocracy Exposed. And this is how access to power is granted through the rape, torture, and ritualistic slaughter of the innocent. That's an incredible book. And for those of you that actually want some names and dates and places and, like, you know, facts to help to give some veracity to a lot of survivors' experiences, like this is the great religion that has been practicing this stuff in our society for a long time. But this is just one of this is one of the first pleasure islands. He has just a section here on page 30 where he goes into throughout the history, when initiations into the devil's simulation couldn't be masked as Christian, they were masked as agricultural. Yet they were nothing. Oh, hold on. Wrong page. Let me go over. He's going into the mystery religions there on that one. But this is called the First Orgy Island. This was the original pleasure palace. In the sumptuous gardens, young men and women dressed as nubile nymphs and coquettish pans openly prostituted themselves to guests in the woodland lechery beneath the stars. This is literally like the Pope's island. He moved himself, the Emperor of Rome, moved himself off of the formal island, the formal place of Italy, in order to go onto an island to create a pleasure island. This is why you find these pleasure islands everywhere, y'all. This is where the origins of that go back to. Inside the imperial clifftop villa, fortified by the finest food and wine served by nude handmaidens, wanton license took hold. Troops of beautiful youths of both sexes gathered from all corners of the Roman world and trained in unusual sexual practices, reclined in a vast marble halls ready to excite the elderly emperor's flagging libido. Known as spinterati, their role was to perform erotic sexual practices in group before the head of the empire. Many of the lavish regal rooms were furnished with pornography and explicit sexual manuals from Egypt, which is ultimately where so much of this mind control goes back to, is the Book of the Dead, which is where child ritualistic abuse is detailed, and why you're dealing with the origins of this are all going all the way back to Egypt and Babylonia. In the private chamber, the emperor indulged in his most obscene desires to the full. He had little boys who were trained as tittlers, and they would swim around as minnows to chase him when he went swimming in the imperial pool, nibbling between his legs. This was the royal residence at Capri, where Tiberius the tyrant lived a life of extraordinary debauchery. For more than a decade in the early part of the 1st century, this picturesque Italian island was the principal home of the Roman Empire. He goes on and on and on, dealing with the sexual depravity of the various popes and the bishops going through there. So for those that don't know what they're getting into, they have a duty to inform themselves about what is the history of these people. Like, I was passed through this thing called Become a Castrati, where they crushed my epididymis as a boy so that I would not develop into a sexually mature man, so that my voice maintained higher and I looked more like a little boy for longer, so that the abusers could get their sexual gratification upon me. This was done to 4,000 boys every single year by the Holy Roman Catholic Empire for hundreds of years. This is still a practice they engage in to this day. And this is something to extend. They have choirs filled with these boys because they could sing at a soprano at an absolute high pitch in a way that is unnatural, completely unnatural. And so it was something that is done in order to create this awe, this aspiration for these people that are obsessed with pedophilia. So Johnny Cerrucci is one of the only authors I have found out there who does a very diligent job as a historian, a forensic historian, of piecing together where these components of life came from.
Really good questions, you guys. I have one that was actually sent to me as a direct message, so I'm going to keep the person who asked it private. They said, my dad served in World War II. He went through horrible trauma. Is it possible that he passed his trauma on to me? I feel horrible guilt that he felt. I didn't do the things he did, obviously, but how do we deal with these things as an adult?
generational curses are definitely a very real thing that should be addressed and need to be addressed, because at the root of it, like if you did read my book, I talk about that woman at that conference down in Dallas who walked up to me and handed me these prayers from Isaiah54.org's ministry. Now, their website got taken down, so I'll tell you that right now. So those of you, like, there's a tab on my resources that hyperlink for the prayers for freedom from generational curses of Freemasonry does not work. However, I did go through the Wayback Machine, was able to track it down. So I'm going to put a new link up on my website, which will get you there. But that booklet that she handed me had all of those renunciation prayers for generational curses from Freemasonry. And that was so profoundly impactful because it dealt with those spiritual roots of curses that these oath-keeping individuals do, okay? There is a legal right that they have to curse to the third and fourth generation, okay? This is like a curse can burn for 3 or 4 generations long spiritually, all right? That, and the way that what's done in these rituals, the reason they're engaging in these oaths, and when they start to curse their children and their children's children, and anybody that would speak the secrets or not keep these oaths or not look after brothers, all these various forms and components of it, they then place all of these curses upon them. Should this ever happen, their tongues are going to get cut out, their organs removed, all of this stuff. What you'll see is that the generational blessings, the life that should have been upon those 3 to 4 generations gets taken and transmuted upon that one individual. And so their power, their prestige, their wealth, their capabilities, their intellect grow and multiply. And then generations beyond them suffer terribly. And you will see physical disorders, physical ailments that mirror what was spoken in those oaths on those children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And it increases in a pressure for children as that are closer to that 3rd or 4th generation, because the spirits that are behind it, those demonic powers, are looking to get another generation back in to swear those oaths to keep that generational iniquity rolling. So you will see a massive convergence coming from groomers, handlers, trying to work their way into the lives of that generation, whether it's the 3rd or the 4th. They will really intentionally try to get one of them back into a secret society so that they can re-enlarge their tent, to renew those promises and those pledges, because that iniquity power bank starts to diminish as that generation goes on. So when people start to come out and they're wanting freedom in their life or restoration, and they want to serve in a different kingdom, those generational curses from ancestors, if you think about this for a second, y'all, you've got a big family tree going back 4 generations. It's big, and there's a lot of people on there. And our society, Western culture in particular, has been so insidiously infected with these oath-keeping societies that it's almost a guarantee that on one side or the other of your family's lineage, it's there. And so, like, that's why I tell people, like, I highly encourage you to pray asking for the forgiveness of the sins committed by your ancestors all the way back to Adam, like asking the Father to apply the blood of the Messiah to your bloodlines, and that he would forgive any of the sins that have been committed by any of your ancestors, that he would break any oath or vow or covenant or contract that you've ever made connecting you with the kingdom of darkness, that no matter what any of your ancestors said, you no longer agree, you no longer consent, that you, as for you in your life, you no longer agree, and that you ask the Father to break those covenants, to contracts, to tear up those things. And you know what? You have a righteous judge. Like, he is the judge of all the earth, and he can absolutely completely destroy those contracts. There's no legal right that they have when he says otherwise. And so that is a critical component to this entire process of the healing. When I read those prayers, y'all, my world came undone. Like, I went through the most unbelievable physiological exorcism. I mean, there's just no better word for it. Like, there was a expulsion of evil coming out of me, and I felt darkness coming out of me, like glue coming off of the pages. It was a stinky, familiar pain that had been with me for so long, like a generational hunger for hurting that had been in there for so long. And so I really encourage people to praying and getting cleansing for generational curses is critical for every person, whether you think you're a survivor of this or not. When you come from a family member who experienced great trauma and great suffering, indeed that can pass along in that regard. But a lot of times it comes from just being in with people like that, living with your dad, living with your father is made you different. You saw different things in life because of that. You experienced the world very differently. And so This is why forgiveness is such a powerful weapon in that regard, and getting deliverance from bitterness and rage and hatred. And people that have seen great violence, it sticks to them and it clings to them, and it's hard to wash that off without just the other route I could always take with my family is just to harden myself off and have nothing, be nothing to them, like an emotional wall. That's how a lot of people handle it. But that's one approach, and it's definitely moderately successful to keeping them from your violence, you know. And I don't have an evil thing to speak against people that survive that way. That generation seemed to just shut off their emotions to others, and it was more okay to be stoic in that sense, whereas now it's not as okay, you know. So I respect people's approaches to trying to navigate this difficult waters.
So in respect of everybody's time, because I know we're coming up to the end of what we put down, one of the questions that I think we all have is like, how do we stop this? Because they talk about it. Is there something we need to do or can be done? Or do we just have to wait for Jesus to come back? Is that where we're at?
Heck no, man. You got to fight till you die. That's it. Don't you
Okay.
think there's some retirement account here? There ain't no IRA waiting for you in the kingdom. I'm telling you, y'all, you got no retirement. Y'all signed up for life. There's nothing else that you were supposed to do on this earth than to try to set the captives free, to loosen the bonds of those who are oppressed. Like, this is the pure fast that we were made to live out in our life, is to try to set the captives free, to raise the dead, to cleanse the sick, like to deliver people from the demonic oppression. Like there's no greater calling on the face of the earth than to the kingdom of righteousness and the kingdom of truth. And the way that we do this is deliberate, intensive, direct action, opposing it and resisting it, and having zero tolerance for this duplicitous world that we are ensconced in, that we abstain. Like we literally say, I do not consent. I will not go along with this agenda that so many people are trying to perpetrate upon us. Like they're literally trying to rape us and shove stuff in our bodies that we don't want. They're trying to force us to wear things, cover our mouths, to silence us. And you know what? You know what's so powerful? People that use their voice, you know? I know many people who are sitting here watching this right now know what it's like to be silenced. And you know what? No one has a right to silence you. Nobody on this earth has a right to silence us anymore. And you know what? The more profound that we get at making our message clear and understandable and being able to be readily communicated on all fronts that we can possibly get, the more of a massive impact we can make at getting out the information of what is going on and not being scared off by their next tactic. Because believe me, the enemy is infiltrating and subterfuging and trying to sow in discord and dissent and destruction and trying to get peoples who are their main tactics, y'all, for those of you that don't know, like satanic covens, they went against this back in the late 90s, early 90s, late 80s, with this whole propaganda game called Satanic Panic, and they tried to dissuade everyone from talking about any of this stuff. The newer modality that they went after is destroying people's licensure who are counselors, trauma therapists, or anybody else who tries to weigh into this. They start working with somebody and they're like, whoa, I thought this was marriage counseling, and suddenly I'm dealing with somebody with all of this stuff, and they're like, what? Like my textbooks, I got classically trained in the field of psychology, and the textbook covered DID and MPD with one paragraph. And they're like, oh yeah, there's that thing. And you're all like, what? Like, that's the training I'm going to get on this? We had like abnormal psychology. It was like months on bipolar disorder, because they can shove so many drugs in those people. They're way more profitable for the industry. So they're like, let's talk about bipolar disorder all the time. And they're like, but don't talk about DID ever. You know, and they're like, because we can't just shove drugs in these people all the time. They'll switch parts and that person's not stupefied. And you're like, what just happened? Like, anyways, I could just go off on a month on that one. Just, we have a deliberate, like, we need to fight back. I don't know, man. I'm just pissed all the time. And I just want people to fight, like, fight back. Like, Yah does not call us to a pacifist culture. Like, you are not made to be a pacifist. You were made to war. Like, period. There's no pacifists in the kingdom of righteousness. I'm telling you right now, every person who ever enters into this fights for their life. They fight for the lives of their friends and their families and the people that are around them. And that's what you were made for. And you need to take all of this horribly painful, just difficult, brutal information, and you need to ask the burden bearer to come alongside you and help you to lift that burden up and help you to show you how you can use your skills, your intellect, your talents, your abilities, the sphere of influence that you have to make an effective strategy to fight back against this and not allow them another victim, not allow them one more victim. And for some of you, that means you need to literally circle the wagons, close the door, not let anybody else into your life for a good long while, and just get healing and deliverance and cleansing for yourself and your family, and literally purge all of the evil that's in your house and in your camp. Like, you got to drive it systemically out of your life and not allow it an iota. And for some of you, that means you need to cut off everybody you talk to. Like, zero access for people that are trying to come out of this is critical. Like, I can't even tell you how awesomely freeing it was when I snapped my phone in half and threw it into a dumpster and was like, see ya. So relieving. Now, people had my address and I had to deal with hundreds of disgusting mind control letters coming into my mailbox all the time. But you know what? I had Chelsea that helped to screen through a lot of that stuff. And I was able, when we went on the road and finally got free from maybe that kind of type of harassment, it was wonderful. And at the same time, you can't run from this stuff. And everywhere I go, I can find it. Everywhere I go, I can find it. I can find victims. I can find perpetrators. I can find it everywhere I go, which means there's ample hunting ground, y'all. Like, you need to recruit people into the kingdom of righteousness. Like, the prostitute and the pimp alike both need deliverance. They really do. They really do. Now, at the same time, I still think it's important that we learn what's called imprecatory prayer, which is praying for the death of our enemies, in that they will not stop this, that the Father would stop their heart. And some of you that are hearing this are going to immediately be like, you're supposed to bless your enemies. And I'm telling you, that's me blessing my enemies. That is absolutely the greatest blessing we can ever put upon them, because the wrath that is coming upon their heads is so much more diabolical than anything I could have ever imagined to do to my enemies. Like, these people need absolutely justice to be served on their heads, and it needs to be rapid and severe and swift. They need fear of God in them. That's one way to say it. And I just pray he lets it loose.
Going off of that, one of the questions from Jacob is, Nate, as we try to help awaken humanity, specifically our loved ones, to these difficult and hard truths, is there a certain approach that you have found to be the most effective when attempting to get through to people and their programming? How do we set people free and lead them to the truth? And then added on to that, especially from things like the LDS Church. While he thinks about that, everyone, thank you so much. These are great questions.
They're awesome. Hey, and we did get started a little late, so maybe we can go just a little long. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying. I'm just gonna
Yeah, whoever wants to stay on. You can...
That's such a difficult question to answer, because every person is so different. Like, you have to understand the individuality of people, and you also have to understand that you're at a major deficit for bringing this information to somebody who knows you. There's a lot of people who don't respect you bringing something like this to them because they know you. I'll be like one way of saying it is, a prophet's not welcome in his hometown. Like, he might be revered elsewhere, but nobody wants to listen to what he has to say here. And that sucks. And so for some of you, it's going to be really painful, because you're going to watch the people that you love the most be the most deceived and most stubborn to listen and hear it from you. So helpful tools, like what we would pray a lot of times is that the Father would bring somebody into their life that they could hear it from. That was one of those things we started praying, that somehow the Father would find a way to orchestrate into their life a divine appointment of somebody who is aware of this information and could bring it to them in a way that they could readily understand. That if he could do that, and I know he could do that, because every one of you that's sitting here today, at some point in your life, this information came across, and I bet some of you rejected it initially. Like, truth is often rejected initially. Then it's generally violently opposed, and then it's readily accepted as obvious truth. So we're in a phase right now where there's a lot of revelation of trafficking as a whole, and abuse or ritual abuse, like that modality that they take therapist licenses if they talk about satanic ritual abuse. They don't if they say ritual abuse or extreme abuse or of trafficking. So, like, this is why I think a lot of the survivor community is getting junk drawered in with the human trafficking side of the equation, just so that we can have an opportunity to communicate about these issues without people just dismissing us because of any satanic element involved. And I don't always mean like Satan with like a Baphomet, scary goat looking creeper guy. I'm talking like real dark occultists here. I'm talking about people that have weaponized the kingdom of darkness and are active agents of that. It's the Satanism is a junk drawer term to describe it, but there is real dark powers and many different deities that these people are using to engage in this stuff. So it doesn't need to be called satanic ritual abuse. I'm okay with that. Ritual abuse is at a level always debased in the demonic, in the darkness, in the kingdom of darkness. However, finding ways to bring that information to them from different avenues is going to be your best tactic. Like I just had playlists of various topics, like truther topics, that I would try to probe people's like vulnerabilities. I'm always looking for a chink in people's armor. And so like I do that through conversation. I do that through deliberate, intentional, investigatory questions to find out what matters to them, like what's important to them, what's valuable to them, and what's something they are quick to defend and safeguard. Like for somebody that's in the LDS church, one of the most valuable tools is finding out for them the origins. I just can't keep saying it enough. It's the same common theme that most people that are a part or participants of the LDS church, just like those that are in the Roman Catholic Church, just like those that are in the variety of different cults and covens that are out there, they don't know they're in one. They didn't sign up for one, and that's because they have entered into a society that grooms people and deliberately withholds pertinent piece of information so they cannot know the truth. And that is that tool that you need to find a way to bring that information to them. But sometimes that comes through, hey, let's talk about genetically engineered foods. Hey, can we talk about what's going on in your drinking water? Hey, can we just talk about what's going on in like your autoimmune system? Like sometimes you just got to start probing those defenses from different arenas, and that might make a huge difference for you in trying to contend against that.
Thank you. You guys, these questions are so phenomenal. I have just been absolutely blown away by this. I'm going to ask something of all of you in a minute. But I wanted to first thank you, and just to let you guys know too, Jamie was awesome, and a couple of others, I believe. Jamie recorded all the books that Nathan mentioned. She put them in the chat. So if you guys aren't looking at the chat and want to make some notes, definitely go scroll up, check out Jamie J. She's awesome, but she put a ton of, I think she listed literally every book that Nathan said. So go write down those resources while you're here too. There was a lot of great ones. And obviously I'll have Nathan at the end give you guys his information, so you guys can obviously contact him if you haven't already, and contact any of us to get some of the resources. But what I wanted to ask all of you, since we got through, it looks like all the questions, or most of them, I would love any of you to step up if you wanted to, and I will give you the floor. You guys can unmute yourself. And I'd love for anybody who wants to share the impact that Nathan has had on your life with him while you're here tonight. I would love to give you guys the opportunity if you wanted to share that. So there's a little like hand thing that you guys can raise your hand. So if anybody would like to personally thank Nathan, I would like to go first. Actually, some of you guys who listen to my podcast probably heard me say that Nathan was, one of the first survivors that, Bridget, Becky, and I all found at the beginning of our journey and before, and somebody who had a tremendous impact on our journey. When I was first researching this, I had a really hard time, even in the beginning of my podcast. I remember Lisa Meister being one of the first SRA survivors that I interviewed, and I stumbled so bad, like I could not grasp like what it was. And Lisa did so good being patient with me and, giving me the 101, and I did my best to hang. And Lisa was another one who, really taught me about SRA. But Nathan, you were one of the first people that I found that really, the way that you speak about this is so genuine and from your heart and so raw. And you literally bear your heart and your soul on your sleeve. And it helped me so much to be able to put these pieces together and like really understand, because you can hear about it, but if you haven't experienced it, it's so, and even after you know about it, like it's just so vile and disgusting and horrific. It's hard to understand. And you did such an amazing job breaking that down and providing a safe platform that you've done on all of your interviews to hear this really hard information and to understand it. And something, I don't talk about my personal life a lot, you guys, but my boyfriend is a Monarch survivor. So being able to meet people like Lisa and her husband, Patrick, being able to know Nathan and Chelsea, it's been really instrumental for me as a partner, being somebody who is with somebody in this community, to be able to have those conversations and to learn. So, you know, this evolution of my own learning has been just really instrumental with having you, Nathan, and the impact that you've had. I mean, record-breaking numbers on your premiere nights, and it's just been awesome seeing how much the community loves you. Like, people love the way that you present information, the way that you make people feel heard and seen, the way that you're able to be so vulnerable with things that most people can't even wrap their minds around, much less go in a public space and talk about. And so I just wanted to personally thank you with all my heart for all the work that you do for all of us. You know, I know that this isn't easy to talk about. This is obviously a cool environment. We're all together. We get to see faces. Like, this is pretty cool. But, you know, let's not forget the courage it takes somebody to come up in a room of 30 plus people and talk about the hardest things that they've ever went through. So I just want to thank you, Nathan, from the bottom of my heart. You've had a tremendous impact on my life. I'm blessed to call you a friend, and it looks like a lot of other people have stuff that they want to share with you too, which melts my heart.
And we'll go in order. We'll start with Jacob, but even just really quick, adding off of that is, even everyone, thank you for joining us. And Nathan, even just so everyone knows, like, when we do our podcast, we are just meeting survivors for the first time. We don't have scripts. We go off of whatever conversation God puts on our heart. We free flow and we go directly off of that. So even just Nathan sharing the full transparency and the raw truth of your journey, especially because you don't know what questions we're going to throw at you, and being able to share not only your healing journey and be a voice for the voiceless, but then also think literally so quick off the top of your head with everything we're throwing at you. And so just so everyone knows, like, going into this, like, Becky and I barely got to connect and meet Nathan literally like maybe 10 minutes before everyone jumped on screen. Like, when I was like literally saying, wait, let's do a boomerang, all of your faces just popped up on the screen, and that's how fast it goes. So thank you so much for even sharing your raw truth with us and being so open to the transparency and answering all of these questions as well. Jacob, I'm going to ask to unmute you if you want to just accept that, and then go for sharing your.
Thank you. Thank you to Emma. Thank you so much to Emma, and for what you do. And thank you to all of you. Thank you to Nathan. I mean, you are all doing something that's hard, something that's very difficult. Forgive me, I'm not good at public speaking, but I saw the Zoom link literally a minute before 9 p.m. Right before it started, and I was like, I'll join that. The videos, Emma, that your channel specifically, I haven't got the chance yet to watch the few videos of the interviews with Nathan, but after hearing him speak tonight, I definitely will check those out. Nathan, you have a great enthusiasm and positive way to, talk about these hard things, which really makes the situation a lot easier it makes it a lot more comfortable while still getting the difficult things across. You have a great enthusiasm. I was born and raised in the LDS church. And I was actually named after Joseph Smith.
No.
My middle name is Joseph. My first name is Jacob. But my entire family is still very active. I'm kind of like the black sheep. First one to really leave and discover, maybe not the first to discover the truth about the origins of it, but the first to really realize that it's what it really is, all the Masonic aspects to it. Over the past couple of years, I've really had a very deep dive into the dark topics of what's the real battle that's happening. Just so much has been revealed, and it's still happening, still being revealed to me. Things like SRA, and Emma, your YouTube channel has been very instrumental to my awakening. I really appreciate each and every one of you. You really do. All of you. I don't know if everyone in here is a survivor, but it does look like the majority are. I've seen a lot of these faces before, and this is probably what is more important than what we're talking about right now. I can't think of anything. This is the battle, and it takes a lot of courage to even want to even think about these traumas, but much less rather, join a live stream or make a entire YouTube channel dedicated to spreading this information. And I think this is I just have the most respect for everybody here. And I sent a couple of Emma's, the video with J.R. Sweet, because, he was raised Mormon as well, to my sister, and like it broke through to her.
Oh.
And like she didn't immediately, like my other family members would probably do. Their reactions would be like, that's insane, like what is he, like mentally ill? But she didn't do that at all. She really, like, immediately just kind of could tell that, like, wow, this man is going over something he really went through. And I think it's slowly, I can see, that's a seed planted. And I asked that question about, have you figured out any ways that have worked better for you to get through to people that have seemed to be more programmed than most? The family they're very programmed. They're very into it, and it's just really hard. I feel a lot of sadness, but I'm kind of stuck. I just feel like I've been shown a lot of truth about this organization, the LDS Church, the corruption and the evil that I'm still recovering from, and other traumas that I won't dive into now. But I feel like it's my obligation almost to try to release my family from that church, if you want to call it that. But I've just been struggling to figure out how to do it, or if I even should keep trying, if that's even God's will for them. It's just a very tough thing, but I want to thank all of you for coming together, strength in numbers.
Yeah.
Where one or more got gathered in my name, surely I will be there with them. And
Thanks, Jacob.
I really do appreciate the purposeful inclusion of Jesus Christ and what he did, and the Word of God before every video that Emma you make. That very powerful prayer of putting on the spiritual armor of God. That's one of the most powerful prayers there is, and it really sets a great tone and invites the Spirit to guide the words of whoever may be on any of those interviews. So thank you all for letting me speak, and keep fighting the good fight, I guess.
Thank you, Jacob. That means the world to us.
Really quick before we go to the next person, Jacob, add all of us on social media. We'll add it in the chat, but do know that you have a whole community behind you. And even if you DM us, do know that you're not alone, and we will gladly, we respond to every message. It might take us some time, but we do look at every single message, every tag, every email, and we truly do interact with everybody. Deb, if you want to unmute yourself, please.
Okay, Deb, you should be good to talk now too.
Okay, I'm not exactly camera ready for tonight, but
You
I
are,
thought
girl. I love you.
show my face in, real time so you can see I'm not, some other person. I just wanted to get on here and say thank you. And, Nathan, I admit I bought your book about 6 to 8 weeks ago, and I started reading it about, I don't know, 4 hours ago. And I asked God, I don't know why, because I listened to all your videos. And one thing I just wanted to tell you, first of all, is thank you for coming back into the fight. Emma will tell you I'm probably now the most skeptical person there is. Just from what I've learned and asking God why, and what's the truth. And the last 3 years has really been amazing for me to understand the little pieces that have been missing in my life. Really, I'm not a survivor. I'm not an SRA or RA survivor as is, but I'm old enough. I've been around the block a few times, and I've had my own just trauma of life, of different things. But I wanted to thank you because I asked God for confirmation if you were real, if you will. One of the ways that he showed me the truth is he told me to look between the years 1200 and through the 1800s. I don't know history. I'm not a historian. It's kind of, it was the one thing that never made sense to me, were timelines. And I didn't get very far in your book today. I want to say I'm up to like page 40 something, but somewhere right off the bat, you wrote in there and you used the time frame 1800s. You could have said 19th century. You could have, your time, you could have not even left a time frame, because that's a huge 100-year gap. But the fact that you use that time stamp that way was a whisper from the Lord that said, listen to this guy, even deeper. Thank him for his sacrifice, and his wife for her sacrifice. I don't know how she did it. So my questions to you are probably not the normal ones, but the obscure ones that are probably not even appropriate for this open forum. But I just wanted to thank you tonight for coming back into the fight and helping people like me who have no reference point of where the evil comes from on a day-to-day basis. And I'm entering that stage of life where I'm the wisdom of that age, entering my golden years in my 60s, that I needed that puzzle piece. And that timestamp, I just gave myself away, but that timestamp tonight meant a great deal. And it added from a lot of what I've learned from before. Some of the things that I read in the first 40 pages verified a lot of what I already knew or kind of learned, that I need to look closer and trust his whispers. So thank you. Thank you, Emma, again and again and again.
Thank you.
Love you, Deb.
I love you too. Okay, I'm taking myself off.
So sweet.
Bye.
Okay, next is Melissa.
Okay, I'm unmuted, right? Okay.
You're unmuted, girl. The floor is yours.
Oh my goodness. I do not feel like worthy to be on the floor,
Yes,
Um,
you are. Yes, you are. We love you.
I am going to cry, so I'll just tell you that, but I'm not going to take long, but I will just say, Emma, you're in your calling. And the impact you're making, you're just in your calling, you know? And then I see people I've listened to, you know, Nathan, oh my goodness, your book. I don't think I've ever heard about a book reading, read every chapter, and then gotten on a Zoom or done anything like that. But it was like such a thrill to do it. So thank you for your book. And I've heard Carissa and Lisa and probably other survivors here. I feel as if I'm in the halls of the great ones that God's gonna honor soon, right? Because the last will be first, the first will be last. So I'm just honored to even hear it. And Nathan, it was a joy to read your book. It was so beautiful. And I'll just read one line because I think it is just so true. And any of you that have shared your stories, it's on page 129. It says, powerful freedom and restoration is waiting in the arms of the Messiah. The freest people ever are you all who have gone through what you've gone through, and then share it with everyone else and just continue to do it. It's so thrilling. I don't think I've ever been so thrilled in my life. I mean, when I met Jesus at age 8, it just gets more and more exciting. And I haven't survived that, but I understand it. And, you know, we're all one body. We are all one body. So what one part's going through, the rest of us are part of that. So, but just honor, bless each of you. And Nathan, thank you for your book, and hug all your children and hug your wife, and just keep doing what you're doing. And I will just say another thing. I mean, so much has come up, Emma, from all your shows, and Nathan, just in your book. Truth, it's just truth. So it comes up in your life, no matter what you've been through or not. And just something that keeps coming up that is such another great piece. I mean, I really could read the whole book and just say that was all great. But when you talked about the tools that are used, you know, it's fear, guilt, and shame. And I have already talked to so many people about that since just reading the book, and it is burned in my brain. And then that God, you know, Jehovah, and I think Carissa might have said this, and then Lisa with the celebration of this evil month. I've learned so much from that, but then even knowing God's name, Jehovah, Yahweh, it's just been so precious, just even knowing him deeper and closer. And he says there's nothing to fear, even though I think the enemy's always trying to stir that up in every arena. And kind of like Debbie said, like, we might not be in the same arenas, but we see it, we recognize it, we pray and are together in one body. And just for such a time as this. So thank you, Nathan. It was a pleasure. And I hope this is an encouragement, but you're an encouragement to all of us. So thank you. And thank you, Emma.
You're so precious, Melissa.
It's been a wonderful evening. Thank you. Love you all.
We love you. Oh, you guys are melting my heart. Okay, so we have, oh gosh, I'm gonna butcher your name. Ian, go ahead, and if I pronounce that wrong, you let me know how to pronounce that. But go ahead, and the floor is yours, my darling.
Hello. Yeah, my name's Ian. This is my wife, Emily.
Hi. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Emma. Thank you so much for all that you do, and I'm blown away to be here. I've been following Nathan for several years. I don't know that I've ever been in the same room as a man of God, a true man of God, and I feel like I'm kind of meeting my brother. So my story, like Emily and I are writing a book, and my daughter was abducted by a satanic family 12 years ago, and we are all in. We are at war by your side, sir, and everybody else here. There's nothing else that I desire in my heart but to shut down this Luciferian kingdom and set the captives free. And I just want to thank you. I'm honored to be here, and I love you. I love you all. We are on the winning team, and it is coming. I believe that with all my heart. There's no other way. There is absolutely no other way. And just thank you. And yeah.
Thank you.
I second all of that.
Bro, you said something that was super critical that I didn't say when we were talking about like how do we actually tear it all down, and it's the words of our testimony. Mm-hmm. Y'all are doing it by picking up those pens. That is the most powerful tools that we have, is the blood of the Lamb and the words of our testimony, and not loving our lives when faced with death. That's how we defeat them. That's how we tear this entire thing apart. You don't stop writing. Don't stop speaking.
No,
keep going. See it through to the end. You know, it's not easy, but it doesn't mean it's not worth it. You know.
No, but it's we have a hope that is just absolutely amazing, and it's a guarantee. And like I wouldn't make it. I'd be back in prison if I didn't believe that our God was all powerful, because this stuff has to stop. This is not okay. And we have nothing else on our plate. This is what we want. This is what we want to do, and it's war. It's war. Praise God.
Please make sure to share your book with us so that we can make sure that we share that out to everybody as well.
Thank you.
And going off of that too, before we go to the next person, do know that as far as our podcast, extending this, speaking on all of our behalf with all of our platforms, is share that with us. And even you're more than welcome to come on our podcast and our platforms, and however we can help share your testimony as well. Do know you have full support of all of us. And even when it comes to resources and networking, do know we will open that up as well. So make sure to follow all of us and reach out to all of us. But again, prayers to your family as well. And do know that you have a community behind you.
And know that you're in a book club, Ian. And we would love to feature you when that book is ready. We would love to have you on one of these calls and feature you for a month. So please let us know so we can help you get the word out and bring people to you, okay? We love you guys. Thank you so much for sharing. Oh, I love this. Oh my gosh, my heart is like a puddle right now, you guys. Okay, so next we have MK.
Hi, it's Mary Kay.
Mary Kay, thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm usually a person that hides in the background and listens and absorbs everything I can. I just wanted to come on and just say, Nathan and Lisa, thank you so much for just sharing your hearts and being so vulnerable. And I know it had to be the hardest thing ever to get through, and I'm sure there were many tears writing those books. And I just want to pray nonstop just for all the kids, and I just weep over all the kids that are still in the system. And just for you guys being willing to bring it out and say this is real. And the more people I tell, they question me and go, yeah, really? Are you sure? Like, this is a thing? And I'm like, no, I've got to tell you, every single person I've listened to, their stories are so similar. There's no way that they are making these things up. And it breaks my heart when I hear both of you talk about people feeling scared to be, feeling like you could be rejected by sharing what has happened to you. And I just wanted you to know that somebody like me, that was never even a thought in my brain, that hearing your story and being vulnerable, I just want to love on you and hug you and tell you how much we love you and thank you so much. And it breaks my heart every time I think of what adults can do to children and why and how that they would ever do that. it's just beyond imaginable. And I don't even know how to put it in words. But I just want you to know, I'm sure all the people here feel like we would never look at you and say this was your fault. It's never been your fault. God has protected you and loved you, but to feel like you can't share because people might reject you, I don't even have words. And Nathan, I just really appreciate you just sharing about Lake Havasu. We have a family history in Lake Havasu, and it's really helped me to kind of clarify some things I didn't understand about what goes on there and why. And even as a child, I felt very uncomfortable there, and I couldn't put words to it. I didn't understand. And that's really helped me. But I just wanted you to know that we all love you, and thank you so much for being vulnerable, and just that we would never think of blaming you, even for the things that you feel like are so terrible that you've done. It's just, how could it be your fault? They weren't choices that you ever made for yourself. So
That's beautiful.
thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. That was so sweet of you. And I think Becky, did you have to go soon did you want a chance to say goodbye to everybody before I move to the next person, just in case?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. My kids are getting in my way. So I have to go pick mine up from band. So I do have to hop off in a few minutes. So if you see me disappear, that is why. But really, truly, for being the first, Emma came to us a couple weeks ago. I was like, guys, I want to have a book club. And to be honest, I was like, are you serious? I have to read a book. Like, I don't have time to read a book. I don't have time to do anything. What are we doing? And to see the response of how many people are on here today, and it's just going to grow. And Nathan, it was an absolute pleasure to be the first book I had to read and to be able to sit and chat with you. And honestly, just the connection you bring to God and to the faith that you have, it's such a light, because I know that people have said that to me, like, oh man, Becky, you're such a light, but to have someone else kind of ahead of me and bringing it, it's so powerful. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Awesome.
Thank you, Becky. And before Valerie, I had a comment from Sharisa in the chat, and she had said she couldn't figure out how to put her hand up, and that was right after MK. So I'd love to bring Sharisa on just to go in order, and then Valerie and Lisa, we will get to you if that's okay. But Sharisa, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, darling. Okay, there you are.
Awesome. Thanks, Emma.
You're welcome.
So I am super excited to share just a little bit about my experience with finding Nathan. And so I am a Mormon, Freemason, Illuminati survivor of a family that is involved in a lot that I honestly don't know about, but everything that I do know has been shown to me essentially through Holy Spirit, because and their own Freudian slips, but and just my lifestyle in general and my own sexualization as an expendable. I was deemed expendable at birth. And so I was not included in, ritual type abuse and those family secrets. I was left out of all of that, which I'm very grateful for. So I have my own channel. It's Kadosh Life. And I want to thank Emma as well for encouraging me to start that, because the whole way that this got started was I just knew a lot about Mormonism. I had come across a lot of people that had secrets of Mormonism. I was a generational healer and had written an energy healing method when I was still Mormon called Spirit Code. And I worked with a lot of different healers who were very gifted, and came across a lot of survivors of things and started understanding the Freemasonry involved behind Mormonism. And I was going to start a podcast called The Philosopher's Stone. And my family was spying on me and really paying attention to what I was doing before I left. Well, it was after I left the Mormon church, and my brothers were all, I had a sister who was a witch who was living with me, and my brother who was a handler, and they were all just up in it. So I didn't get to start my podcast then. And it's a good thing because I didn't know that my own family was involved in what I was going to expose. And then I did prayers of sovereignty, released some generational curses, came to this understanding of who my family was, and all the pieces just started coming together. And I left the house I was staying at where my whole family was spying on me and took off on the road, and I was gang stalked by Freemasons and witches for the next week and followed. And I've had many people try to take my life since then because I have, vital secrets of my own family and the Mormon religion that I am now exposing. And, everything that I watched, when I found out that my own brothers and nephews, I have like 28 maybe or more, I don't even know now, I've lost count, nieces and nephews, and most of them are boys. There's only 7 girls in all of that. And these are all sodomites. And so I have a family full of this. And when I got out of it and realized the oaths of secrecy my own family had taken, and what the oaths of secrecy that I had taken in the Mormon temple, being initiated into their own elite form of Freemasonry, all I wanted was to hear a man just freaking open his mouth, and say something about this and just leave. And so when I found Nathan's book, I had written a poem when I left my family. And when I was living in my RV on the road, they took my kids, and, I was trying to get my kids back for a year. And I spent 6 months just on my own, just recovering from CPTSD after all of this. And so I just want to share this poem that I wrote, that when I found Nathan, I listened to your book like under the covers in my bed, just bawling my face off for like hours. And I finished the whole thing in like a day and a half because it was just an answer to this poem. So I just want to share this with you. It's called Ye Secrets of Men. One man with courage could change the whole world. To open his mouth, the truth finally hurled. The secrets, the oaths, the disgusting control. Your wills have been melded and meshed in your soul. You know that you hate it, the lies and deceit. To God, not a king yet, in shameful receipt. Generational curses and chains you won't break. Fooled by the power that with magic you make. No true power is there, only wretched false order. The blood of a savior only heals all this horror. Black and white checkers on the floors of the room, where they take all the oaths and fill men with gloom. Allowing the wool to cover the eyes on all of his family, for the Mason he spies. One pant leg pulled up with swords to his throat, in secrets and murders and mysteries they gloat. If you ask them, they won't tell you, for the lies are a must. Or to cut out the tongue and slit the throat, how unjust are the secrets and oaths promised they, Lucifer, dressed in costumes of grandeur, hiding secrets to lure. Little boys, tiny babes, recruits from fraternity, shaking hands, drinking beer, networks wide as the sea. False beliefs that because God allowed to go on for a time and a time, but their minds have been conned. Read their Bible with the compass and the square as their guide, but forgot that the word lives alive deep inside. Prophecies of the old tell a tale that's still true. Come the hour and the end of the tricks they have spewed. But dear men, do you really think the Lord shall not end? That no consequence comes for the boys that they bend, shouting, gird up your loins and I'll shatter the eye. Open up, holy child, not allowing their cry to be heard or expressed, for the deaf and the dumb is the spirit they call in when they call forth to come. To the tree of the knowledge, good and evil they call, from the fruit of the tree that did cause man to fall. And still he is fallen, as he builds with his bricks the idols and the churches with the lasso he whips. With the force, no free will a sovereign find there. Not a wheat, not a free man, but a weed called a tare. So divide them he shall, consequences to come. No, you don't get a free pass to ruin and shun all the women who desire loving man at their side, all betrayed by the order that does none but divide. So the high be made low, and the lofty hewn down, and the low be made high, on their head placed a crown. Here it comes, watch and see, as my words come to pass. Only Jesus, my friends, with a kick in the ass. For the donkeys, Sodom, shall receive their reward. So repent ye, say repent ye, must now call on the Lord. For the grace of our Father and his mercy, only just, only minutes are left for all things that do rust, to be made new in the waters that are living and free. Only job therein to do is to run and to flee from the false brotherhoods that defile all that's pure. Jesus Christ is his name, and his blood is the cure. So I forgot to mention.
Wait a minute. Can we just take a minute? How amazing was that, you guys? Go, girl. Oh my gosh. That was awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, that one was just when I was in so much despair about discovering, and not only were all my brothers and my father, my children's father, my ex-husband, a sodomite. I was married to a sodomite for 14 years who did not love me. I was in an arranged marriage with somebody who was, my handler and had absolutely no love for me. And I know there was things my son was initiated into, which he still isn't ready to talk about, or maybe just doesn't remember. And so I just have to live in this space of holding, of warfare, and fight this battle while I know the Lord is working behind the scenes. And I know I have visions all the time about what's coming. And I know a lot of the heads of these serpents are about to be cut off. And a lot of the heads of some of these men are going to be removed. And so I really second, with what Nathan says about these men, because I've been given literal kill orders, which are just prayers that I write from Yah, where he tells me, write these names and send out the order and dispatch the angels, because it's coming. This war is coming, and we're going to see a lot of these men removed from positions of power so that we can see an influx, because Nathan is the only man I hear talking about this. And so I was so thrilled to go, okay, we got one, and I know there's so many more, especially even in my own family, in very close relationships that I had. About every lover, boyfriend, anybody I've ever been with has been a part of this, because I've been so handled my whole life. So there are so many men that I have loved that are dear to me that I pray for, that will come out of this. And so it's just really been a powerful blessing to me to have written this, and just had so much desire in my heart to just hear one man just speak on this. So just praise God, praise Yahweh, praise Jesus for the blood of Yeshua. I'm so grateful that you're doing this, because I know that there's going to be a lot who are going to be, an influx of men coming who are going to be watching your example and have that pattern set before them to know how to get set free.
Hallelujah. We need way more men. You're right. You're absolutely right. We need to pray continually for those men to rise up. Male abuse is incredibly culturally taboo to talk about.
Yeah.
We have a culture of secrecy when it comes to men being abused, and that is ultimately, at the end of the day, that's the one that most people have to deal with. But that was beautiful. Thank you so much. I do really look forward to doing a show with you as well. And you're a powerhouse of prayer and intercession. So thank you for continuing to pray and beseech the Father. We need people to hit their knees and to weep painfully, continually. He says he stores up our tears as weapons in his bowls of wrath. And I always tell people, weaponize your tears, man. Yahuwah never wastes a single one of them. And I love that. We serve one who doesn't even waste our salty tears. And that's a beautiful thing. If I could find a way to store up the tears that I have wept on this earth, and to pour it out like pure fire on my enemies, man, that's such a salty weapon. That's such a deadly tool. And I love that. So those of you that do weep and intercede, and that's critical, and pray for men. We need warriors. We need men to be men. That's why we got so completely taken out. That's why so many of our children and families got destroyed, was because the men were directly targeted so early on in this entire agenda, and they emasculated them, and they took away their masculinity. at the core tenet of it, and they took away their will to survive and their will to fight, and they turned us into drones, you know, a bunch of eunuchs walking around emasculated, looking for a reason to fight, and they have no idea what it is, and so they play their video games, and they get entertained, and they're miserable. But this is a great war, so thank you for being a part of it, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you to all of you that are here. This is incredible. Y'all are awesome.
Cool. Sharissa, you know, I love you. Everybody, I encourage you to please go follow Sharissa. Her podcast is called The Kadosh Life. I will actually link it. If you guys follow my podcast on YouTube, I'll post one of her videos so you guys can go ahead and follow her channel if you aren't. It's amazing. She's doing amazing interviews. She's phenomenal. She's been a guest on my podcast as well. Her testimony is on my channel. Go listen to it. All her information's there too. But Sharissa, you are a ray of light. You're a warrior woman. I'm so proud of you and honored to know you, and I love you. Thank you so much for sharing tonight. All right, and so next we have Miss Valerie. Valerie, if you want to go, are you okay? It looks like
can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me. I just want to start by saying that the survivor community are my heroes. And Emma, your show is such a great resource. I'm a coach. I coach SRA, government mind control victims. That's what I do. Wow. And I have such a passion and a love for the survivors. And they are my heroes because they're so brave. And when they share their stories, it exposes the enemy. And I have been able to fight warfare like I have a passion. I have a passion, and the authority of Jesus is so powerful. And it is changing. It's changing because every time we pray, the chains get broken for each family, each bloodline family. The survivor exposes them. We break the chain, and they all have to crash down. Everyone has to come down. And that is right, Nathan. Just stay in the fight. Don't give up. And we have resources. I want to say Charissa's warfare manual. My God, I tell all my clients about it. I pull up that sovereignty prayer. I have every single one of my clients pray that prayer, and they are empowered by that prayer. And they are super soldiers. They have been used by the government like you would not believe. And Nathan, I have a client where Jesus took her tears and turned it into a diamond crown. These tears are not in vain. God loves you so much. You are my heroes. And Nathan, when your passion, well, you could see, my husband says you and me have the same kind of passion. When you go on your rants, I'm like, yes. I'm like, I get so excited. So there's power and agreement coming through the YouTubes, coming through. This is powerful. We are changing the world. Like, you don't hear my voice, but I am agreeing. There is power and agreement. And Lisa when you guys talk, I am screaming in the background, and I'm just one person. So I love you all so much. And Emma, your show, you are like a sweetheart. You're like sugar. You are so beautiful, and I love your show. And Nathan, thank you for your book. I got an ISR Bible for me and my husband. Oh, I take all your book recommendations. I bless your wife and your babies. I loved when you exposed what was going on in that church. I was like, this is what was missing. Christians have been too polite. We've been too polite. We got to protect the kids. We got to be a voice for the kids. The only way it's going to stop is if we expose it. Yes, we love them. Believe me, many of my clients are perpetrators, but it's got to stop. It's got to stop. And you're right. It's not their fault. They were brought into this, but they want to be free too. Mm-hmm. They don't want this to keep going on. So I loved when you did that. I mean, that blew my socks off. I was like in tears saying, finally, and like Nathan, you are rare. We need more men. Most of my clients are women. I do have a few men, but most are women. So we need the men. So that's something else we need to pray for. And you are known in my coach community, Nathan. We're spreading. I wouldn't be surprised if the man who trained me calls on you for an interview. I would love to see that. And my husband is a survivor, and I'm writing a book too. And you know, we're married. Me and my husband are married 33 years. He came out as a survivor. He left the homosexual lifestyle. We have 6 kids and 12 grandchildren. So that's what my book's about. And that's it. I just love you all so much. Thank you.
Oh
my gosh, you're
awesome,
so
Valerie.
perfect.
Come on. Fire me up, Valerie. That was great.
I am
Man,
on.
fan it into flames, girl.
You got the fire, Nathan. I'm right there with
Light
you.
'em up.
And even Charissa, like what you said, like these unredeemables, let the Lord just take them out. He knows who they are, but I pray for the ones that are redeemable to get healed.
Amen, sister. Thank you so much. How cute is Valerie, everybody? Oh my gosh, I love you. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate you. And then looks like we have, last but not least, the amazing, wonderful Lisa Meister. Lisa, are you unmuted? There she is. Hi,
I
Lisa.
am unmuted. Thank you, Emma. Nathan, it is just a delight to meet you. I have enjoyed reading your book, well written, and just riding the waves of how to write, how to tell your wife. I was right there with you. Just the angst of how's she going to take it? Is she going to stay there with you? And, you know, with your kids and the information and going through life and how strong you were with God throughout the whole thing. I love it. And your prayer warrior, taking what you learned in the demonic and taking that into being a prayer warrior for God. It's just powerful. It's powerful. And you're taking this and you're teaching it. And that's what I think is the beauty of survivors, is that once we have the redemption of Jesus, we're the prayer warriors, right? Yeah. And we know how to walk into the spiritual darkness because we're not afraid. And you show that so powerfully in your book. I've just enjoyed it. And I just am just delighted to meet you. Emma, thank you for this. Bridget, thank you. Becky's not here. And I just really appreciate seeing everybody. This is just the best thing ever. So thank you.
Thank you both as well. And everyone, before we go into close, if you haven't seen already, the next month's book club will actually be with Lisa. So here's the next book. And that is Only God Rescued Me. I'm trying to cover it for my light so you can see it. But we will continue to post it on social media. So this will be the next month's book for November. And then we will do the same thing at the end of the month. And we will have Lisa on as well. And we'll do another one. But to thank you, Nathan and Lisa, for vulnerability, transparency, and sharing your testimony, especially when it comes to SRA and when it comes to so many people just waking up to this. And so many people label it conspiracy theory. And so now we see, I know when we first connected, even Lisa, SRA was one of the hardest topics, I would say, for me to talk about, especially because I would get so mad and frustrated and I would just break down, like knowing to the extent we knew, and so many people, spiritual warfare is something we had to learn, especially once we started podcasting. It was not on our plans to podcast. Emma actually brought the parent side of Save Our Children podcast to the forefront, because first, Emma's podcast was originally, the conversation was all of us working together, and we only thought of 5 survivors. And then next thing you know, it grew. And then we had so many questions about parenting and survivors now that they've done the healing and childhood trauma and what they wish as far as parenting, and or being grandparents, how to keep your kids safe, and all of the aspects of even digital safety. So that's where you'll see more of that on our podcast. But again, we still do feature, we have some with Lisa as well. And now that we've read Nathan's book, even though we've been inspired and knew about Nathan, now that we've read deeper into it, because even though like this book club is new, we've been reading survivors books and sharing them prior to even Emma bringing this up and say, hey, let's do a book club. So our main thing is, even if you've gone to our website and Stand By Survivors, we have a whole survivors link from books to music with the veteran community, mental health, holistic healing, everything on standbysurvivors.com. And so we'll update it, even adding Nathan and more resources. But again, thank you guys so much for even continuing to do everything that you do and be out there on the front of all of this as well. But
yeah. Hold on, I want to say, you guys, this is awesome. Like, this was so cool, and I hope that you guys will continue to do this every month. And I'm even thinking along the lines of like, how cool would it be to do like one of these a month with Nathan, right?
Super
Have him come on and we just all jump on and just have fun, and we could start sort of a Zoom community. You know, I think this is really cool to connect with everybody. I just want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for taking the time. I know that it's getting late for some of you who are on the East Coast or even Midwest or wherever you're at. Thank you with all my heart for caring. And, you know, these podcast platforms like Nathan's, they don't matter unless you guys listen to them, right? Otherwise, we're just shouting into the void. It takes you guys caring and sharing and listening to even the things that make you want to turn away, you know, sharing it with other people and in any way that you can, contributing to this fight. You know, it really does take all of us. And these testimonies, just like how Valerie said, these stories are not in vain if we bring light to them and if we give survivors voices and we create, you know, basically our own version of mainstream media. You know, turn off the TVs and listen to survivors. They're the ones who are in the rooms with people. They're the ones that have the missing puzzle pieces. They're the ones that we should be leaning on to help us figure out what this world is that we live in, you know, and we couldn't do this without you guys. It's because of you that our platforms are able to grow, that voices like Nathan's are able to be heard, that these books are getting, you know, spotlights shine on them, you know, and it's just such an honor to have all of you guys here. It's really cool to see all of your faces and to actually get to sort of meet you. And I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your busy lives to come on and hang out with us. And I wanted to see, Nathan, is there anything that you would like to say before we start closing?
Yeah, there's something.
Over to you.
Two of you mentioned this, and I spoke at a conference for Warrior Bride Ministries on Saturday. Was that this last Saturday? Man, I remember all the time between then and now. It's been a busy time, but there's a few times people have said that I came back to the fight, you know, with the survivor community, and you know, that's totally true. I had stepped away from this field. There was like, okay, you know, just full disclosure, I thought that the entire world was going to come crumbling, like this whole thing was going to come crumbling down after I published my book. I was like, it's going to burn. And then it was really not like that. I was so hopeful. I was really hopeful that it was all just going to like, there was just going to be this massive unleashing of all of this like destruction of that kingdom. And so when it didn't happen, there was a really, and then I went to that, I went and got that counseling and stuff done, and my whole inner world just completely eviscerated, and my entire, like, I just was very, very sad, and I felt like I was very unneeded, and that there wasn't like maybe a responsiveness in the same way. But I'm really thankful, like this summer, and it kind of started with Marie Z, who reached out. I don't know how that ever happened, but somebody connected me with her and had me do an interview with her. And I had not done an interview about this stuff for almost a year. And last October, November, I was almost on the edge of being like, I'm never going to talk about this stuff again. Like, I'm just going to try to just completely put it aside and leave it behind, because people were so driving me away, like driving it out of me. A lot of places I go, people never want me to talk about this stuff. They want to like groom me to be a totally different person. They want me to be a talking head for them, you know? And it just was so powerful to see what has happened since I said yes to that interview back in, I don't know, May or June. And it's just been amazing to get to connect with the survivor community again. And I think it's really grown and matured in a totally different way as well. And Emma, you're a huge integral piece of that. And I had no idea what y'all's website was here. This Stand by Survivors. This is awesome. Like, this is amazing getting to see this and go through here. Y'all, there's warriors out here who are fighting like crazy, and it's so good to see it. Like, there's some sneaky shadow like fighters out there that are just totally stealthily just completely killing this kingdom of darkness every day of their life. And it's awesome. It's great. Like, we are very scattered remnant out there. We are quite scattered and quite feeling like we're very alone. The enemy's really good at making us all feel like we're very lonely out there at times. But you know what? There is way more of us than there are of them. I really am convinced of it every day of my life. The more I find out that this is what I was made to fight in. I've been looking for the wrong community. I've been looking for the right community in all the wrong places. I'll just say that. I have tried in the agricultural, the entrepreneurial, the business side, the just churchianity side. I've tried in the like Torah side. I've tried in all these different venues and avenues. And I'm like, why don't I match in any of these places? And it's like, nah. Like, I was born to be a part of these wonderful brothers and sisters, you beautiful men, women, and children who are just the most exceptional, rarest treasures on all the earth. You are truly the Segula, yes, precious treasure. And I am honored to be among you. I truly am. You guys are incredible. You inspire the heck out of me. And I'm thankful to get to know y'all. Like, I feel like I'm on Emma's platform channel at times when she does a premiere, and I'm all talking to these people in the chat. I'm like, these people are amazing. Like, why don't these people come to my chat? Like, why don't I have any of these people in my chat? And I'm like, oh, because I kind of have been quiet about all this. There's a lot of people who've watched my channel for the last 2 years who had no idea about any of this. I'm like, my book's been up there, and they're like, I thought you're just some Nature Nate guy. My children watch you play with rocks and chase alligators. And I'm like, whoa. So there's going to be a big purging on my channel as I just continually put out this kind of information and content on a relentless basis. But I'm so excited to be able to deliberately connect with the survivor community on a more deliberate basis, because y'all have so much to teach me, and I'm just so inspired by you tremendously. So thank you for your steadfastness and your willingness to completely contend against this radical kingdom of secrecy and corruption and compromise. Y'all are warriors, and I love you.
We love you, Nathan. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, everybody, for being here. This is just so cool. My heart is like bursting out of my chest right now.
For those listening, because we are going to post this on our podcast, I believe so.
Oh, yeah.
But for everyone listening, Nathan, if we can have you share where we can find you on social media, and that way everyone listening on all of our platforms and Spotify, Apple Music, all of that can get that information as well.
Yes. I think I'm on Spotify and Apple Music and all that. I think my audio scriptures, I did also an entire recording of the audio of the scriptures, and my book are all available on those platforms, Amazon, Kindle. You can get a signed copy at snatchedfromtheflames.com if you like. I also have just free download links there for those of you who would like to hear it and listen to it, for the audio scriptures for my book and for an e-book PDF form of it. Those are all available on my website, in the video descriptions of every YouTube video I post, and on Rumble. I think my Rumble channel is called the LinenRailroad. I know that seems a little different, but I had already taken Snatched from the Flames as my handle, but I didn't know that, and so I linked it. Anyways, I totally screwed that up, but I'm working on it. I also have a TikTok at Snatched from the Flames, is that one as well. My YouTube channel is YouTube Nathan Reynolds, the LinenRailroad, and there's other places I'm out there. I got some guy who's really helping me on the tech side of these things to pump out my stuff to different places, because I'm a terrible person on that side of those equations. But praise y'all for those incredible warriors who know how to work inside this cyber world and help people get their voices out to the nation. So we need this, and there's no greater time to be alive. I tell you what, this is the most exciting time to be alive. I am not interested in getting out of here anytime soon, and I hope all of you that are continuing to do this would indeed spend some time, y'all. I challenge you, spend some time listening to these podcasts that are on these platforms. Goodness gracious, you think you can listen to some stuff out there and talk about some like wild rides. These survivor stories, y'all, are some of the most incredible, heroic journeys that have ever been written about. They are the true stories of survival, way better than any version of a combat story or somebody who got lost in the woods. These people have survived the unimaginable, and they are tremendous heroes, and I love you all. Thank you for having me here.
And of course, everyone listening, we will be sure to add all of the links on all of our platforms, as well as Nathan's YouTube and how to find his book and everything linked to Nathan. And then for November's book club, Lisa, if we can have you share your social media handle. And I did link where to buy the book in there, so we will add that as well too once we post this to the platforms. But Lisa, if we can have you share your information for those who don't follow you and want to learn more over the next month as they're reading your book as well.
And real quick too, I have the RSVP link. If you scroll up just a little bit in the chat, I have the RSVP link in there if you guys want to. And I just posted a short video on my YouTube channel today that also has all the links and how to sign up.
And for me, it's Only God Rescued Me. So if you go to onlygodrescuedme.com, Only God Rescued Me, the book, podcast, on social media, you name it, it's the same. So it's very simple that way.
Thank you, Lisa girl.
Big thank you. And then we're going to close out. So everyone who has followed our podcast and even has listened to Lisa on our podcast, you're familiar with this closeout. So Nathan, before we completely wrap up, the last question is, if you had the world's attention for 30 seconds, what would you say?
Life is more precious than you can ever imagine, so don't squander it. We were made to wade into the fray with the victims and the victors alike. We are not born to be cowards. We are made to be brave and to fight back against these oppressors who have circumvented the halls of justice. And we are made to hold them accountable and not allow them an iota of escape, but to be willing to fight ferociously for the sake of the truth, and to have a hunger for the word and a fear for our Creator, and not to fear the face of any man. Thank you guys so much for letting me have you. This is great. Y'all are inspiring the heck out of me. Thank you.
Thank you again for everyone for tuning in and staying. Even though we went over, we greatly appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for all the love and support. And change starts with awareness. When does it stop? When each and every single one of us have the courage to stop looking away and turning a blind eye. You don't get to look the other way on this issue. Human trafficking is a $150 billion industry. Put down your smart devices and listen to your children, family, and friends. The world is hurting. We have a duty to protect the innocent. If we don't, that blood is on our hands. Everyone has a story. Together, we must rise for the children. It starts with one person. It starts with you. When you say, am I a part of the problem? When you face that mirror and start holding people, family, and friends accountable and start being present. You are not alone. Be bold. Be you. Be your own kind of beautiful. Stand tall and speak your truth. The world will adjust. They can't take your voice. It's never too late to do what's right. We want to hold space for those who are dealing with mental health, adversity in their life, those who are just waking up to this, those who were abused sexually, mentally, domestically, those who have had their innocence stolen by the corrupt systems, CPS, foster care, in your own family or trusted adult figure, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a loved one, whoever it may be. Know you are strong. You are beautiful. You are enough. And we are sorry for everything you've endured. You have a powerful voice. And we pray one day God gives you the strength when you're ready to speak your truth and be true to who you are. Never let anyone dim that light. Know we are here for you. Again, you are not alone. We will be the generation to end human trafficking. Enough is enough. Survivors, you are not alone. We hear you, we see you, we stand by you. Sending you love, light, and blessings. Take your candle and go light the world. We love you. Love Nathan, the Imagination and Save Our Children podcast.
We love you guys. And I just had one more request. If it's okay for Lisa to lead us through the shaking of the Luciferian kingdom prayer, if everybody has time for that really quick, and then we will wrap up for tonight. What do you think, Lisa?
Absolutely.
And for people not familiar with this prayer is amazing. So Lisa's going to share a verse with us and then we repeat it after her. Where did she go?
And really quick, after this, if everyone can stay on, I would like to do a quick boomerang after. So if we can stay on if you want to be in the boomerang. But go ahead, Lisa.
From where we're seated in Christ Jesus.
From where we're seated in Christ Jesus.
Yes.
At the right hand of the Father.
At the right
Right hand of the Father.
The Lord God Almighty says.
The Lord
God
God Almighty says.
The time has come.
The time
has come
For the Luciferian kingdom to be shaken.
for the
Luciferian kingdom to be shaken.
We decree.
We
We
decree.
decree.
Let the great shaking
Let the great shaking
of all who worship Lucifer begin.
of all
who worship Lucifer begin.
Your sorceries and sacrifices will not help you.
Your sorceries and sacrifices will not help you.
Your protection is removed.
Your protection is removed.
Let the shaking of the Luciferian kingdom increase.
Let the shaking of
The
the
Luciferian kingdom increase.
In Jesus' name, amen.
In
In
Jesus'
Jesus' name,
Amen. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Everyone who's still here, if you can do us one great favor is, especially tomorrow being Halloween. Yeah, tomorrow's Halloween. If you can please pray for the victims, survivors, and children. That is such a heavy night in rituals. And if you can just if you have a friend who's a survivor, especially of SRA, if you can keep them in your prayers and just be there for support, as this time is a heavy month, actually from now till the new year, but especially tomorrow, if you can please keep SRA survivors and the children in your prayers.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you so much, Nathan. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining. I love you guys.
Love you too. Good night. Bye.
Bye.